It's 5:01 and I call to order the work session agenda for the 7/27/2023 meeting.
Mayor?
Are we live, Callie?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Thanks.
First thing I have is a consideration of work session and regular meeting agendas. Do I have a motion?
Mayor Claffey,
Councilor Wood.
I move to approve the work session and regular meeting agendas as presented.
Very good. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Kesker, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Airwood.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And that brings us to the second item on the agenda, and that is a discussion of a request by Mooney and Jackson on the proposed William A. and Queen Elizabeth Miller Heritage Park in Stanton's West End. Ms. Beauregard.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey. And I would like to just to turn this item over to Councilmember Woods at this time.
Oh, Mayor Claffey, thank you, Leslie. Good evening, Ms. Jackson. How are you? Can you hear us? No.
No, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes, absolutely. How are you? How are you this evening?
I'm mending, honey. You may or may not know that I've just been released from the hospital, so I'm not, anyway, I'm still kicking. Let's put it that way. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's good to
Yeah.
know. Thank you.
Well, wish you a speedy recovery.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So our discussion this evening is about the Heritage Park in the West End on, I know it's property that you have and other heirs in your family that have property on the West End. And what is your actual specific vision and plan for the use of the property?
Well, first of all, thanks for allowing me to speak this evening. My plan is a pretty simple one. The property of which we speak has been in my family, since 1910. And there's only a small amount left now, nearly 4 acres or so. And the idea is to preserve the history that was made on that land by my grandparents, William A. and Queen Elizabeth Miller, which many of you may know, had an orphanage there. They didn't call it that, but for regular parlance, we'll say that's what it was. But it was a home to over 300 children. And in my view, and in the discussions that I've had with many of the citizens of Staunton, including officials, it would be a proper and fitting testimony to their, not only their humanitarian efforts, but their contribution to the county and the city of Staunton in those many years. So the idea is to replicate some of the what was on the property at that time, and maybe not the house, but with signage to show what was there, you know, what and to have a historical reference point for for the history. The idea is to create trails and like I said, signage and play area for children, and a learning space for children that deals with the environment. And I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I have enjoyed walking the grounds with Chris Tuttle of your staff, and Nancy Sorrells and Maya Alexander and Nancy Sorrells and a whole host of of other individuals who seem pretty interested and enthusiastic about the prospect of having that space utilized as a community park. And I've spoken with Miss Parkinson, I think that's her name, Vicky Parkinson of the West End, who talks about how that the use of the property would fit very nicely in with some of the area development or planning that's going on in that in the West End, because I understand that it's been sorely neglected. But my reason for wanting to bring it to your attention again, I mean, I have talked to many of you and ad infinitum, it seems like, but the idea is to see if the city would be interested in having a park of this sort on the West End under their care and concern, should the right circumstances be provided. And those right circumstances have to do with the acquisition of the property, and as I have shared, the idea is to qualify for a grant of substantial proportion that would create the property in such a fashion, an easement of sort, so that the land would be used in perpetuity for the park. And then if the city were interested, that it would then be theirs. So far, you know, the grants that I have tried to identify have require no funds from the city. So I would, you know, I would need, however, a letter of interest, really, and that's about it. If you want to ask me anything other than that, it's just that I have the largest share of the land, but that's not relevant to what I want to talk about now. But what I do want to say is that there's a plan to convey at least 2.62 acres, because that is in my name alone, and then the balance of the property that would come into some discussion and scrutiny. So, I mean, it's very simple. It's a land, one of the few pieces left owned by African Americans in that time frame. And Papa William Miller had the ability to purchase the land, he and Big Mama, for $1,000. And I don't think too many people could have coughed up $1,000 during that time. So he had a lot of prowess. So I want to talk about his history and her history, and how they came together to create a safe haven for children who were in various states of need in the Shenandoah Valley and beyond. So
Can we ask some questions at this point, do you think?
Please.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was,
Thank you.
is it okay? We could.
oh, absolutely,
ask a question?
sure.
Okay. So one of the things I did hear you ask is that the city, your expectation from us, the city and our role would be just a letter of interest. So would that property still be yours? You're looking to get grants to do what specifically with the property? Are you going to gift it to the city that way that we're maintaining it after you get a grant to purchase the property? Or are
Yeah,
you
but-
looking for us to do that?
This is why I was so vociferous in my argument that we allow the particular grants person to be a part of the conversation, so that you could understand very clearly. The grants that I am looking to acquire would then, the property would be conveyed to them, and then their property would then be conveyed to the city. And that would then become city property with some caveats, of course. And the caveats would be that it would be maintained as a historical site and preserve, the history of Queen Miller and William A. Miller, that kind of thing. And the plans are in the making now. That's what I've been working on with quite a few people. By the way, we also have an archaeological dig that's been going on, but we need money for it. So that's part of the other part of the grant requirement, so that we can see what's under the ground. Because there were 2 fires there. And as you may or may not know, and the final one in 55 took the lives of 2 precious children. Anyway, we wanted to unearth what was there and create the history from the archaeological aspect as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's right.
Counselor Henry.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson Amos, I think it's clear that it would be a terrific thing to honor your grandparents in that way and in that section of town where there is no park for kids. But as the financial agent here, I'm just wondering the costs. And I see Mr. Tuttle in the audience, and I don't know if he can answer these questions. But from what I understood from our communications, the VOF grant would buy the land, and then the property would be in the name of VOF. And as Councilmember Woods just stated, it would would it go towards the city, and then it would transfer to the city. And I saw several things in the letter, your proposal, that cost a grand total of $44,815. But it wasn't clear who was paying for the $44,815. And that had to do with the site design, lots of different things for just preparing the property. And then I don't know if you and Mr. Tuttle discussed the cost of maintenance, because we're not aware of what would be on the property. So we are not understanding the cost related to maintaining the property. Do you have any idea of what those numbers look like?
No. Okay, the $48,000 was for a planning grant. That's the whole purpose.
Okay.
To plan what it's going to look like, what it's going to be like, how it's going to serve the populations. That's the idea of a planning grant.
Right.
The acquisition grant is to purchase the land, because the one thing for sure that that I am looking to do is to transfer the property in a way that it becomes a part of the city's largesse, as it were. But there's no way, when you're in the planning process, I think since you said you're a financial person, we can't jump without knowing the plans.
Yeah.
It's hard to know all of the parameters of what it's going to cost. What I'm saying to you is that at least the cost of acquiring the property would not be yours. How a park is maintained would be something in the bailiwick of Chris Tuttle and those with expert who deals with the parks itself. But the outline of the park, as I've discussed with many of the stakeholders, has to do basically with identifying the structures. We've uncovered a couple of structures that were there in 1910, and to have them have signage there to know what it was. And then there's not a whole lot on the land except for one house, and that's subject to a different level of discussion. But
Ms. Jackson, we have
Yes.
another question.
It has nothing to do with the purchase of anything, Ms. Jackson. I'm kind of curious.
and you may or may not know, but have you done any research? Are any of those 300 children's descendants still in the area? Have, you know, what they've done, whatever? I'm just kind of curious.
Absolutely. And we begun a documentary with some of them who have given some idea of the relationship that their parent or relative had to Big Mom and Papa. Yes, but I've known quite a few of the children of Queen Miller and William Miller. But yes, there are those who still live in the valley. And as I said, we are in communication, and we have captured them on film, as well as Mary Baldwin, the past president now, Pamela Fox of Mary Baldwin, because Mary Baldwin played a good role, a substantial role, I understand, in the home. Relatives of the Garbers, we have photographs, and there was a neighbor, an adjoining property that where they had a very great relationship with Big Mom and Papa. And so, yeah, I mean, and I'm always anxious to discuss it.
Well, Ms. Jackson, one other question. The one site, I think it's the site that's 0.37, about a third of an acre. It has a residence on it?
You I'm sorry, say it once again, please.
The site that has approximately 1/3 of an acre, is that have a residence on it?
No, they 2.37 acres is the one that has a house on it. And that was a house that was built for Big Mom and Papa. So what we're trying to do to see what is the best use of that particular structure. Right now, I have somebody going in to see how to maintain it, because it hasn't been lived in a long time. And so it's losing some of its stability. So
Well, that's
if
my
does that answer your
question.
question? But
No, my question is, do you want to see that house salvaged and saved, or
yeah.
you want it eliminated and turned into a park? I mean, what
Oh,
are your long-term thoughts about it?
No. That the idea is to salvage that. And as I said, in the planning stage, we are in that. One of the suggestions has been to have it as a museum, or an immersive opportunity where just visitors could stay there and be a part of the entire plethora of whatever the entire park turns out to be.
It's going to have to be rehabilitated then.
Mhm.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right.
Definitely. Yeah, have somebody look. Yes. Mhm.
Further questions from council?
I just have one more.
Yes, ma'am.
So the interest of us for city tonight is to the ask that you bring to city, actually not the interest, the ask that you bring into city tonight is that we are interested in having the park.
Yes,
Is that what you're looking for?
that's what I'm looking for. And, subsequent to that, I mean, if you are, of course, there's so much development that we would do together, but yeah, the idea is to have you state with some specificity that you'd be interested in having the Heritage Park as I have defined it.
Right.
And so if we were to say we're interested in that, then would that help you go forward with the grants? Do you need that in order to go forward with the grants that you are looking for?
Well, it would make
acquire.
it would make the grant application much stronger. They give grants to individuals and organizations, but if they meaning the grant, the funders, understand that there's a real interest on the part of the city to partner in some fashion with this whole concept. It makes for a much stronger application, and that's what we're told that that would be helpful. Yes.
I think I recommend that at this time we urge you to continue on the grant process, but I think Ms. Beauregard, you probably need to talk to Mr. Tuttle and analyze this situation and see what our best course of action would be.
Okay.
Is that fair?
That's fair. If you all are interested in having us take a further look at it and come back, is that what you're asking? I just want to be clear on
I
that.
would be
I'm still a-
interested if
Yeah.
the city would
Still a
at
little
least take a
confused.
look
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
find out,
Dig in a
you know,
little
what's it gonna cost to, maybe if we get grants, what's it gonna cost to rehabilitate the house, whatever? And then even more importantly, what is it gonna cost on a yearly basis to keep that park in a running order?
Right.
I mean, is it 100,000? Is it 50,000? No, 500,000? I mean, I don't know.
No, either. No.
So we just need some figures like that, you know, what we're looking at, not just this year or next, but on down the road.
Well, all I can say is it's a lost opportunity to not to have had that Nathan Burrell as a part of this conversation to answer all of your major financial questions, except the maintenance of the park. Once we see what the park looks like, it's not going to be as developed as Gypsy Hill. It's not even going to be as developed as Montgomery Hall. But yeah, that's.
Well, I
just
don't
totally-
think, I think this is a first step, Ms. Jackson.
Okay.
Ames. There will be an opportunity, I think. Right.
I know Chris has spoken
Yeah.
to Mr. Nathan. I can't think of his last
Mr.
name. I
Burrell.
apologize.
That's right.
Burrell, thank you. And so we are happy to
Okay.
reach back out to him after, we were going to do that after this discussion. We
Okay.
can share information with you all that as we learn more about this. And so that's certainly the direction we can take. If that's what you all would like to see happen, that's fine. We can certainly do that.
Is everybody in
Yes.
agreement?
Yeah,
Yeah.
more specifics would be good.
Yeah, more
Okay.
specifics,
And we'll talk to
please.
Mr. Burrell further as well. And get
Okay.
more information
All right.
on
I'd
that.
appreciate that.
And thank you, Ms. Jackson, for the proposal.
Okay, now, thank you.
Hope you
All
feel
right.
better
So
soon,
much.
get along well.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you for being
Good
here.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Next topic on the agenda is the discussion of the 2024 legislative program.
Don Blair is walking to the podium right now.
I see. Welcome, Mr. Blair.
Good early evening, Mayor Claffey, members of council. Wanted to talk to you about two bills that the council has expressed some interest in for a legislative agenda this coming year. And these are specific bills that I think it would be helpful to staff if during this work session I can get some ideas so I can draft up some model legislation. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is something that really doesn't require a lot of effort. It's more just making sure there's consensus. And that is the idea, as you know, former Mayor Oakes resigned in January of this year. And the way that the Code of Virginia is written with the idea of a special election, there's a prohibition on holding a special election on primary day. And then there's this, the provision for special elections in the Code of Virginia. You have to hold a special election at least 55 days before the primary election day or general election day. And on top of that, we asked the registrar to estimate what it would cost, and she said it would cost $19,000 to hold a special election just for filling the remainder of former Mayor Oakes's term. And so in talking with some of you during that time, there were a lot of you who just questioned the wisdom about you can't hold a special election on a primary day. And the reason that's important is that if there was a primary and you needed a special election, you wouldn't have to pay that extra $19,000 cost. In addition, you know, as we know, holding a random special election on a Tuesday with no other elections for a city council seat, not only does it cost money, the turnout is likely to be extraordinarily low. So I think the first thing I'd like to talk about is if you all are in agreement to draft some legislation. I'll take that call. To ask the legislators, whoever is elected this November, to end that prohibition on a special election on primary day. And again, the reasoning would be cost and perhaps a little more participation than just, again, a random Tuesday in, say, August or February holding a special election. So is there consensus to draft?
There was one thing that Mayor Claffey and I were talking about when we were discussing this, that you thought of that I hadn't considered in this. Now, if it's primary time and there's an incumbent running, then, you know, from party A, then party A would not have a primary election in that, in which case it could be somewhat one-sided in who's going to the polls on that day. So that's the only issue I see with doing this. I know I'm the one that brought it up initially. So a regular election, you're going to get theoretically equal interest in both parties coming out. So in that way, I can understand the issue with having a special election on primary day that could bring out one party or the other. So something to consider.
Okay, so let's run this back a minute.
Okay.
So what we want to do is have a special election on primary day. Is that what we are saying, that we want to do that?
Well, it would give not only you, but any city or county or town the ability, if they had a vacancy on their town council or board, if there is a primary, to have the special election on that day, if the governing body wishes to. Doesn't have to, but it makes it an option.
So that means we could have had election in June when they had a primary.
Right.
So that's what this is saying. It's not election day per se, it's on a primary day.
Right.
It would be an
Well,
earlier date.
Earlier
It would be an
date.
earlier date.
November.
You could have the
Right.
issue solved before waiting for next November.
Okay.
Yeah, the real benefit would be 2 points of an election, a potential election per year. And I mean, if there's all that. So that's the plus side of it.
Right.
Is it going to cost us less money, or is the money going to be the same cost?
Well, if there was already a primary election that date, it would theoretically cost less money. But if you just mobilize all of the election machinery, otherwise, it's going to cost $19,000 per our registrar if you were to say have your special election next Tuesday.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
And again, I think, you know, the pluses and minuses of this, I think Councilor Arrowood points out some. I do think this, though, while it's true one party may have an advantage, it is also true that I think holding a special election, and I did a little research and looked at some Virginia localities, and your typical turnout for these, because they do happen, sometimes instead of waiting till the general election, you'll have like a clerk of court or a council. The ones that I saw recently, you're talking turnout of less than 4% of all voters. If it's just one office on one random Tuesday, it's an extremely low turnout to hold. So you have to think a primary day, there would at least be a little more turnout than that. The other item was something that Councilor Robertson brought up back during the budget discussions and wanted to flesh this out a little more with all of you, which was the idea of Uniontown and the idea of utility hookups and those fees that would be charged. As you know, there's currently some action looking at Uniontown as a small area plan and trying to look at ways to honor the residents and the former residents there, as well as try to revitalize the area. And during those budget discussions, and I think all of you nodded when Councilor Robertson mentioned this, it was the idea of maybe for Uniontown, and I believe you said at the time you wanted to see folks charged the amount for utility hookup that was applicable when the area became part of the city. Is that, now that could be hard, but I wanted to maybe have you all discuss, since this only would apply to one specific area in Staunton, the state code doesn't give you the authorization to do that. We would need to ask special legislation from the General Assembly. And I think we have a pretty good map of what Uniontown is. We can draw that up in the proposed bill. But we need to know exactly what authority you're looking for. Is it for you all to set a rate, for you all to waive a utility fee, or what is your preference here?
My initial feeling was, I'm not saying so much that they not get charged like everything else, as far as, whatever the amount of water they use, whatever. My initial feeling was that they either be waived the hookup fees. I mean, after all the years that Uniontown has been neglected, and we have not made any attempt as a city to do anything for them, to get them to water hookup, to get them sewer and everything. Just to me, it's then to come in and say, okay, we're going to do all this thing and we're going to charge you $5,000, $7,000, whatever it is to hook up. To me, that's a slap in the face. And that was my initial feeling, is that when those people that living there, they ought to be waived that hookup fee. I mean, they need to be, if they use so many, gallons of water or whatever, they need to be charged that, of course. But the hookup fees,
So
like to
waive
see
the
waived.
connection fee
Yes, sir.
would be your.
How does that work though, in conjunction with Brad, in your Habitat for Humanity, when we waive the fees for certain areas at certain times? How come we don't have to have a legislative?
Because I can tell you, because there is actual state law that allows that.
That one's very specific. And actually Stanton has made that one more specific than state law. State law allows localities to waive the hookup fees for 501c3 nonprofits. But Stanton's made it more specific to say that they have to have a sweat equity and other parts of it, like another hoop to jump through. And Mark, on your point, it's more like 12,000 a house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot
Now,
more.
Mr. Blair, you and I had talked about this in the past, and did you have something to say?
I did, but that's okay.
Okay. But about how to actually do this, to say that, because you don't want to just have it wide open and, just for this community, we're doing this. We want to, but a precedent is a tricky thing on it. And so we talked about the idea of, if an area that is annexed into the city that does not have city utilities available at that time, when the utilities become available, the residents or owners of that area would be able to have hookups done and, realistic to the time of annexation, which would bring this to 1948, which is what you were talking about on that. So we don't want to have it wide open for
Anybody.
anybody, but then we get into the part of how long do they have to own it? I mean,
Yeah.
we're fortunate with Uniontown that a lot of the original people own this, the Crawfords, the Burrises, but if somebody buys it
Yeah.
a
To
year,
develop it.
Right.
yeah, do they get
a $12,000?
do they get
free ride?
1948 rates?
Yes.
So I want the people who have historically owned this,
Right.
Right.
Agree.
and there's been this historic wrong. We want to do what we can to make that better, but
Is there any way that we could offer like interest-free financing over a period of years that people could hook up at whatever our costs are now but spread it out over a period of time, 10 years or something, so it wouldn't be that big of a hit for them.
Here's a legal question. Does Stanton have a
I don't know if we finance.
finance field? Branch? I don't believe we do.
My guess is, Counselor Holmes, you could ask for that. I think number one would be the administration. Do we have this internal staff?
Acting like a bank, I guess.
Yeah,
Is that-
to act like a bank.
Yeah.
Have to create a whole new department.
And I think to Counselor Arrowood's point, you could ask for, say, folks who live, and again, we can draw up or write up the actual area we're talking about for the special legislation, describe it geographically. And you could say that if the owner has owned the parcel for 20, 30 years in this area at the date of the enactment of the legislation, then utility connection fees can be waived. I mean, you could write it up that way. I mean, you can ask for the idea of interest-free financing over a 10-year period, but again, that's,
A headache.
well, not, and I don't know that we have the staff. It just depends on how many people would ask and
All right, let me ask you this. If we do this, let's say we do, for those people that have owned that property and have endured through this, we waive the fee. But somebody's coming in brand new into the area that, we're trying to get them to develop their piece of property, whatever. Maybe I'm just throwing it out there. We cut the fee in half or 3/4, or give them a break. I'm just throwing it out. I don't know whether that would work or not.
Somebody had thrown out once about the idea of charging them the cost of when they first bought the property or when it was annexed, or I think it was one of you guys. But yeah, I think something like that would be fair. I mean, we definitely want them to have it. We want it to take place. We want to be fair about it.
But I think that was a little different than what you were
Yeah.
saying, Mark.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
I mean, it's different.
Just
I mean,
throwing out
I'm
ideas.
throwing it out there for discussion. I
Yeah.
mean, that's basically just to see what, for those people that have owned that property
Yeah.
forever and have been there and endured through not having water, not having sewer, I don't want them to have to pay for the connection fees.
Yeah.
But, I'm just throwing it out there,
Right.
if somebody's coming in and bought the property new, and
You want to incentivize them.
I want to, some kind of incentivization. Yeah, I'm just, I don't know.
It would be interesting to see a few
Thank you.
different specific proposals for how we could do this, perhaps generated by staff.
well, I don't think that's realistic in
Yeah.
this sense, because what you're asking for is is to ask the General Assembly for special authorization.
Yeah.
And I feel the
we
first step
I-
would be, the first thing would be to eliminate the cost for the residents that's been there since the sixties.
Okay.
So
So you're saying that even if, okay, I understand eliminating the fee, we got to ask General Assembly.
Right.
We have to ask the General Assembly if we want to reduce the fees as well?
Yeah, can we charge $1?
Yes.
Okay.
Now there is, and in preparation for this, there's a code section. The only discounted fee and charge that the state code currently permits is for low-income elderly or disabled customers in the city of Richmond and the town of Louisa. And for localities with less than 200 with a population density of less than 200 per square mile. That's in terms of just the city. Now there's the habitat, which is about connection fees, but I want to be clear. Are we talking connection fees or water fees in terms of trying to incentivize development?
I was talking particularly connection.
Just
fees.
pure connection
Yeah.
for, okay.
Would we fit under the 200 population per square?
No, I checked that. We do not. And again, that's just for elderly, disabled, and low income. And that's for your actual charges for the water or sewer.
Okay.
But let me try to summarize. Would it be fair to say for this special legislation just about Uniontown and folks who have lived there for a long period of time, you'd like to look at describing the area, waiving the connection fees for folks who've lived there since 1960. If you are I guess that's the other question. A lot of folks may have passed away. The property may still be in their family. Is that who you're trying to
yes.
Yes,
even
and
if-
historic ownership,
Yes.
yeah.
owners? Okay,
A lot of these deeds haven't been touched in, 80 years.
right. And then to your question about options, I will take a look at what options there are to incentivize, if any, in the code. And let me ask you all this. If, let's say there aren't provisions that allow just pure incentives to just waive utility connection fees. There are, I guess, one option that comes to mind, though I'd have to look, is the idea of the council appropriating money to the EDA, which has a little more authority and incentives than you as a governing body. The other would be to look at other additional legislation. But is this idea of incentivizing an area for development just limited to Uniontown? Is that what you're talking about?
It's the only
That's
answer
all.
we've had so far.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Okay,
I don't want to.
Open up a can of worms.
Exactly,
right.
because it could pertain to other areas that we don't even know.
That we
about.
don't know about. Right.
And what I do fear is not fear, but what you could see that I think is not really what you're aiming for is if you try to incentivize it by having additional waiver or reduction cost, you could have a major developer go in and try to buy out everything and
Yes.
just
Right.
set up a subdivision
Yeah,
and
just
say,
whatever.
well, you half off.
Right. So
Could we,
exactly what that's it.
is it
Yeah.
possible that, that when we passed this last budget, we decided that a certain percentage of tax would go towards Uniontown, towards West End? Could we use some of that money to help people pay their hookup fees.
Well, it's different.
I would,
So-
again, I need to look at the EDA's authorization per the state code. You may be able to take some of that money and appropriate it to the EDA for utility connection fee. I can look at that.
That'd be a good way of doing it. Be a single.
Without going to the legislature.
Right.
Sort of like a rebate instead.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would handle it from an individual standpoint without.
Yeah. Right.
I
Legal.
think that makes more sense. We look into that.
I will, but on the other bill, in terms of just the pure waiving the fees, I will also draft something for that. Meaning waiving fees for folks whose families have owned property there since the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's fair.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Mayor.
All right, next item on the air is a discussion of council memorandum number 19, proclamations and other forms of recognition. Now, this is brought at my request. And I thought we had handled something at our retreat. And it turns out that I don't think we're quite following number 4. If everybody would turn to the council procedure memorandum number 19. I am 100% in agreement of 1, 2, 3, and 5. I think we're doing it absolutely. And I think that's what we want to do. Now, on number 4, it reads proclamation in council chambers presented by the mayor in observance of certain day, week, or month such as Juneteenth, Arbor Day, Veterans Day, also presented to nonprofits with national, statewide, or local observance such as Pride Month, Shenandoah LGBTQ, September's Childhood Cancer Awareness. All proclamations presented in council chambers must be unanimously approved by city council.
So we're not doing
We've
that.
never done that. And I never intended to have that. But I do want your all's buy-in or anything that's given in council chambers. All right. And that was the part that I intended to. That's what I thought I was intending to do when we had the retreat.
Right.
And for some reason, number 4 did not pan out. Everybody in agreement?
That we're gonna
So you-
unanimously agree on any proclamation.
I don't even know if that one needs to be unanimously approved by city council. The only one that at the retreat that we had, it was the key to the city, number 5. And that one specifies the award of a key to the city must be unanimously approved by city council. That was the only one that we had that on.
Yeah.
But on the number 4, there's the last line states all proclamations presented in council chambers must be unanimously approved by city
You
council.
want to remove that?
Need to remove that.
Or 4 to 3. Your decision?
Yeah, is it in that case, is it just you
yeah,
or?
I mean, read number
Yeah.
3 and read number 4.
Yeah.
and Tell
All
me
right,
what. the
number
difference is.
3 is a commemorative proclamation presented by the mayor or designee, which could be any one of you
Mhm.
people here on council, to an organization at an event or a function in recognition of local, state, or national achievement. So let's say we go to Downtown Business Association for Small Business Day. And somebody wants to go and on, what's their big day?
Saturday.
Saturday after
Small
Thanksgiving.
business Saturday.
Yeah. Yes. So if we're going to give a proclamation for that at that time, any one of us on council should do that. It does not require a unanimous vote, correct? Basically, all I'm trying to do is regulate the number of proclamations that are being given at
In
council chambers.
So I thought that's why you wanted to unanimous
Yeah,
everybody to vote on it. If everybody didn't vote on it, it wouldn't be. but you, in return, you just want to be the one that says yes or no.
I'm
This-
not asking for that.
Well, then who does?
Anybody that, let's say that you want to present one to the veterans in November,
Mhm.
you would say, Callie, we need to have a proclamation for the veterans in November, and then it would come to council. Would not need to be unanimous approval.
Mhm. Got it.
And then we would know ahead of time that we were involved in a veterans pronouncement would be given at our meeting,
Okay,
as opposed to us just coming into a meeting cold turkey and saying, oh, you know, who are all these people? And
Right.
It's true, though, I mean, the idea of, for number 4, that I could slip a strange proclamation past that you have to give,
Right.
you know,
that's why it's supposed to go to Callie, and that's why Callie's supposed to notify us so that we know. And
okay.
that's the part that's not
So
happening.
basically, we would be approving this. It would just be coming in an email from Kylie before the meeting.
Correct.
Okay, that
Okay.
sounds.
And
that
how
sounds
far in
clear.
advance? I think it has to be like, at least on the, if you do this on the website, if a citizen wants to do it, I think it's something like 45 days in advance. So something.
That's up to Callie, I
All
mean,
right.
because he's the one that has to
Yeah,
turn it
okay.
around
All right,
and get it out.
all right.
I think that's,
It's-
I like
it's-
the idea, just knowing what ones are
Yes.
being done, because if you
Yes.
go somewhere and give one,
Yeah.
then we might not know that you've done that.
Well, they
Right.
would only be done here in council, wouldn't they?
That's only on number
Only
4.
on-
4, 3 is wherever.
Okay.
3 is wherever,
And
and then
whoever.
2 can be a request for a significant individual organizational achievement or milestone. You know, it could be someone's 100th birthday. You
Mhm.
know, if, you know, city wants to recognize somebody for a 100th birthday, that's
Yeah, I
great. That's
think
what we
it's
want to do.
nice. Yeah,
All right. Is everybody in agreement on that?
That's fine.
yes, I think.
Golly, can you rewrite that and retweak it so that it takes all that into play?
Yes, sir.
Do we need to vote on that, Mr. Blair?
Well, it sounds to me like this is just a clarification of the policy. What you're really asking is that the policy reads, all proclamations presented in council chambers must be unanimously approved by city council. Just what you're saying is, as I guess, a practice and better explanation of that, you just would
I don't
prefer.
want that to be in there. I want to drop the unanimously approved
So
by city
remove the
council.
last sentence.
Must be notified.
Must be notified.
Yeah, we must
We would,
know.
you would need to then, yeah.
Yeah, I think they would.
You would need to amend it.
Can one of us just real quick make a, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a recommendation that we drop the last line in number 4 and take out the unanimous approval by city council.
I just want to clarify.
It-
So
yeah,
I can
clarify.
unilaterally decide to give something, or do we have to have a 4-3 vote? I mean,
Yeah.
Majority.
Right.
Majority.
majority,
4-3,
okay,
yep.
that's good.
But,
Not a
Like-
unilateral discussion, okay.
Now we're voting.
but I
We're
want,
trying to understand.
No, no,
to-
I just
No.
want,
Or proclamation.
now, I want to understand
Yeah.
because you want to take out the last sentence. But the council still wants to know about these
Mhm.
proclamations. And do you want to, beyond that,
A majority approval.
So add a sentence at the end that talks about that. Instead of the unanimous, instead of the sentence at the end that talks about unanimous approval, add the sentence that talks about
majority.
majority consent from
Majority,
city
a
council
majority
for any proclamation.
consensus.
Thank
Yes.
you. For any proclamation read in
And you're
council
taking it-
chambers.
And you're taking it out of the mayor's hands, so the mayor can't arbitrarily be,
That's fine.
all right?
Does
And
that-
everybody's involved.
John,
Yeah.
Is
does
that
that
fine?
sound good?
Yep, perfect.
Let me ask you one, just now thinking,
What, you want to
if
just,
we
Well-
do the majority consent, is that something that has to be done on this dais?
it
Or
does?
could we, okay,
Yeah.
but see, that would have to come before council on this
Right.
meeting. It would slow the process down a little bit.
Because the Freedom of Information Act requires any vote to
Okay.
be in public.
So therefore,
think that's
Kylie, you're
okay.
gonna have to put it in, you're gonna have to put it out the
that's fine.
last meeting of
The meeting
August
before.
for any September proclamations. that fair?
I think that's great. Then people know who we're giving
There we go.
proclamations
I agree.
to. So
Okay.
we're open. Terrific. What?
Motion has been made and qualified. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Terry Holmes seconds. Mr. Kesker.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all for that. And that
Thank you.
brings us to item 5, presentation by Fraser and Associates on the final draft of the entrance corridor overlay district design guidelines. I apologize for being late to the Fraser. We're glad to see you. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey, City Council members.
Aye.
The item before you is the presentation of the final draft of the entrance corridor guidelines. Updating the guidelines has been a priority of this council. Council provided funding for this initiative, and we're very fortunate that the individuals that I believe have done more entrance corridors than anyone else in maybe the Mid-Atlantic or maybe beyond that are residents here in the city, Bill and Kathy Frazier. They have worked on this for some time. They have provided updates to the Planning Commission along the way. And last week, they provided this presentation on the final draft to the Planning Commission. And although that wasn't a public hearing, it wasn't no formal motions or votes were taken, the Planning Commission was unanimous in their support of these guidelines. Without further ado, I'll pass it on to Bill and Kathy Frazier to provide this presentation.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Rodney. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, thank you all very much for having us come tonight and give you a presentation on these long-awaited updates to the existing guidelines. And without further ado, I just want to spend some time going over how we got to where we are tonight. And then I will show you samples of what's in there. I'm not going through all 40 pages. I know the Planning Commission and our committee has seen these. We've gotten very little feedback. And it's my understanding that you all maybe have not seen these yet. And I hope that you will get a chance to and be able to read them and get back to us with any kinds of suggestions and so forth.
It was in the packet that was sent out last week.
Oh,
So,
great.
yes.
Oh, good.
It's
Okay.
been in
Well, I
there.
hope you all had a chance to go through them to some extent. So here's what we were asked to do. And you have 13 different documents right now, or 11 for the 13 corridors. And we've changed a lot of things in terms of the second one, in terms of illustrations and text and so forth. We hope they're clearly written. And there's a lot of new technologies that have come out in the last 15 years that we've included a number of those. And of course, the whole idea is that the corridor legislation from the state enabling legislation is connected to historic district legislation. So that enabling legislation allows cities and localities to have corridor overlay leading to historic districts. So sort of where we were, we gave you all this analysis report last year. And we obviously toured with staff and did a lot of descriptions and analysis of the building types and the types of corridors. Generally, we have 3, mostly residential, more rural, or typically commercial corridors. I think when most people think of corridors, they think of Richmond Road, Richmond Avenue. But we have a lot of different types of corridors as well. Like we do all planning projects, when we work in communities, and in today's environment, we wanted to have lots of outreach, to have the opportunity, the public to have an opportunity to speak. So we did workshops here in this room and adjoining rooms. We did an online questionnaire that anyone could fill out. We interviewed some of the business owners on the corridors, and then we provided updates to you all, the Planning Commission and our committee. The workshop, we had You can see here 22 people. We broke them up into 4 groups. They discussed a series of questions and then they came back and reported on their group. I think some of you may have been there that evening. The big issue was almost everybody agreed this was very important to have guidelines that provided improvements and or changes on the corridors. And then why was the appearance is important, flexibility is important. And again, they're your front door to your community and they lead to all the rest of the community. They're used by people every day. They play an incredibly important economic function in the city. And so then we asked, how about rating? And everybody said the corridors, they're average. Staunton's not an average town, but somehow our corridors are believed to be average. There is a lot of variety, obviously. And these are just some of the quotes that people said. And it all depends on the corridor. It depends on the economic activity, the age of the structures, the level of regulation that occurred when these corridors were developed or redeveloped. And they continue to change. Another question was, right now, Staunton is fairly unique in that everything is done administratively by a planning staff person. And most communities use the planning commission or another review board or a historic board. And they meet jointly on 2 different types of projects with different guidelines. That's something to consider if you're going to rewrite the ordinance, which I think is going to have to be done as a part of this. And it gives them more of a community involvement and it's more transparent and open. However, to do all that, you need guidelines that everybody can understand. So now turning to the questionnaire, we had almost 275 responses. About 10% of those were from the business owners or property owners on the corridor. If you look at moderately to very to extremely important, 86% of the responses went in those categories about how important is it to improve the design character and the appearance. It was overwhelmingly majority wanted to see that. So where we are, we typically do a draft text and suggested graphics, and then we give that to everybody to read, and they get back to us with edits before we lay it out. That wasn't the case here. We were told to go on and lay it out and give a final draft. So that's why you just got this document last week. Our original scope of work included also putting it online and asking for feedback and doing a final public workshop for the city that's advertised. And we need guidance on that. We were told there would be no more input from the city. We'd like to know if you all would like to have the community to have any more input. And then we've got these new standards that the city's using for accessibility that we have to get a consulting firm to do that for us. And then the file goes to you all. And then we'll talk a minute about the zoning and how that zoning update would relate to these guidelines. And as we know, again, state legislation, it's all based on the historic core of a city and the corridors leading to it. And so when you have this legislation, enabling legislation, and in Virginia, a number of cities, independent cities have adopted it and use it. What can happen as a result, obviously, is that you're inserting another level of review. At the same time, you're then giving more guidance in terms of the vision for those corridors. So hopefully it helps make the city a better place. It improves business and more customers. It certainly makes community residents hopefully proud of their community. And of course, as we say, it's the front door. Everybody coming through has their first impression as soon as they get off those interstates and come to Staunton. What is Staunton? They've heard so much about it. As you know, we've won close to 50 national awards and accolades in the last 10 years, 15 years. So what would cause a business to come here? And we've had 15 new chain businesses on Richmond Avenue in the last, 10 years or so. The motels, all the restaurants, and the car wash, the automotive parts, and so forth. Well, obviously, if you're going to look at a national franchise, they're going to do their market study about what's the regional size draw your local market, what are the income levels, traffic counts. That's why Richmond Road is seeing so much, because they have the highest traffic counts. How much competition is there? And then obviously the feasibility, what can you afford to do and to make a profit to come here? And then what are the regulations like locally, and how clear are they? I think most business people understand there are regulations in every community regarding zoning and corridors. It just depends on how clear they are, how strict they are. Do they reflect the vision that the community wants? Are they reasonable? And are they administered in a fair way? So all those things typically happen. And we'll talk about the current guidelines in that regard. Now, if you're already here and you're just relocating or remodeling, then you already know the market, you know your market. And then can you afford that upgrade or that move? And then what are the traffic counts? And then again, what kind of competition do you have? And can you deal with the regulatory aspects? So when we first started, as we always would, we would look at the comp plan goals and objectives and the vision. These comments that I'm showing you now can come out of the comprehensive plan that's currently adopted by the city in terms of corridor planning and the particular aspects of corridor landscape design, signage, and so forth. There's some level of planning now that's spreading out from downtown on the corridors, as we know, down at Greenville Avenue and Richmond Avenue in particular. And then if you do streetscape planning in the future, work that out. And I think some of that is happening. And again, we've been told, make sure it's business friendly, and I hope this is. It's also, we hope it's intelligent and smart, and that most reasonable people would think it's an improvement from what we have now. In addition, the council then had 3-year priorities that were given out, and that was to update these guidelines and then align them with the current zoning. And that's the challenge, and that's one of the things we're going to go into more detail with you tonight. General principles, so you say you want to upgrade the corridors, you want them attractive or nice. Well, how does that translate into actual physical appearance? Strengthen the edge, human scale, not just cinder block boxes. Strive for a new vision, not repeating the existing examples that don't reflect what your new vision is. A lot of communities we work in also spend a lot of time on existing buildings. We're seeing mostly new construction here. And then continue with the aspect of some level of landscape, particularly along the edges, masking all the necessary utility stuff. And as the city then decides to make improvements on the corridors, to design that in conjunction with other private efforts. And we've seen that done very successfully in other communities. That's beyond these guidelines. That's actually a separate program. So we start with a vision. We then get the goals. We then write the text and graphics. They align with the regulations. And then, as I just mentioned, there are other opportunities as well to go beyond just saying, well, here's the new reg, but here we're going to do some public improvements to go along with that. And here's some financial incentives and technical design or assistance. And of course, with Kathy's experience with the Main Street program throughout Virginia, and I don't know, 35 cities in the last 35 years, we've seen literally thousands and thousands of improvements made in downtowns based on those 3 things of the other opportunities. And some communities are doing that on the corridors as well. And we know Lexington's been very successful in doing that.
So is Fredericksburg. They had a very focused program on their
Lexington,
corridors. Lexington and
Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, Leesburg. So we've talked about this, and I think I showed this slide to you all before. You know, what's a plan, what's a standard, and what's a guideline? Well, the plan is Central Avenue. And unfortunately, I have to say, in reading the 450 some pages of existing guidelines, they contain some aspects of plans, they contain some aspects of guidelines, and then they also have standards, but they don't distinguish between those in the text. So standards are then generally, we think of them as numerical requirements, you know, 3-inch caliber tree every 20 feet, or a sign not to exceed 1 square foot per linear foot of facade. Those are standards. Guidelines, every zoning ordinance has those. So does sign ordinance, landscape, and parking. All those are numerical regulations. And they're part of every zoning ordinance in cities throughout the country. Guidelines then are more general. They offer some flexibility because there are guidelines and they know you can't write the same thing for every site condition you might come upon. So there has to be a common sense level involved. But they're a lot more specific than just saying, well, here's the comp plan and then here's the ordinance. They're kind of they give the vision graphically and text between the goals and the regulation. So right now, when you look at all of Staunton zoning, you see these following chapters relating to the districts. And so there are probably 10 of those are related to the corridors. Some of the corridors are mostly residential, and they may be any of those different levels of residential. And then, of course, we have the general and local business. You have, then if you go down to 18.8.3, that's the actual entrance corridor overlay district. That chapter was written when the guidelines were developed. So the guidelines come out of that chapter. And we'll talk about that in a minute. It's somewhat confusing. So the district regulations such as R1 or low density or B1, whatever, those are the standards. And typically they are related to what's allowed in terms of uses. What can you do and what can't you do? What's the coverage on the lot, and then your setbacks and height. Now, the last time the zoning ordinance was totally rewritten was 70 years ago. And it's been edited and altered through time in many different years and segments. Having worked with city managers and councils since 1975, I've seen a tremendous amount of change in all of this. And since those last 45 years that I've been involved in things like this. Now, besides those zoning chapters, then we have the supplementary regulations, and that's where your signage comes in, your parking, your lighting, your site plans, your landscaping. So those are additional chapters. So all of those contain standards, and mostly numerical standards. Now, it's not to say they have to be absolute. They can certainly be ranges. A setback should be not less than 5 feet nor more than 15. Instead of a setback has to be 10. Same thing with heights. You can go up three stories of 45 feet and go back 5 to 15 and then go up to a 75-foot height limit if that's what you want. And that has been the case here in some sections of town. So there's also that idea that even though these are numerical requirements, they can have some level of flexibility in them. And when they are rewritten, you may see that some of the goals from 1960s are not the same goals today. And that's likely the case. Back then, everything was zoned, many things were just zoned general business. So one size fit all. So parking requirements for an office on North Augusta could be the same as a McDonald's on Greenville Avenue. It's that sort of general approach as an economic development strategy is fairly broad and fairly naive in today's world. And there's an opportunity, I think, to tune some of this that reflects the real character of the corridors instead of a one size fits all, particularly signage, parking, and so forth. So the supplementary regulations like the signs and the parking and the landscaping lighting, they also have the standards. And again, some of those, again, may be one size fits all and they could be customized. Do you want every residential corridor that's zoned professional to have the same parking requirements as a business on Richmond? Are you encouraging asphalting the entire front yards of a residential area? Do you need a backlit large sign on a residential area that affects the 3 houses around it? When the business is only open during the day, it's an office. Does it need a sign, the same type of sign as a corridor sign? So there are a lot of things you could do. At the same time, your corridors, the commercial ones, need lighting. They need signage. That's the intent. That's the purpose of those. And there are also then the idea that there are these commercial pockets within residential or rural areas, and then how do you treat those? So it's an opportunity for everybody to sort of look at that and rethink it and decide what makes sense today. So then all of these zoning regulations and supplementary regulations are standards. They aren't guidelines. And as I said, they're older. And while the comp plan gets updated with lots of visions and wonderful statements about how we're going to do all these things in the next 5 years, the zoning is totally separate, and often that obviously does not get updated as frequently. And so that can cause some idealistic visions versus the reality of regulations. So now is where you need coffee or chocolate, because this is we distilled and dissected the 454 pages of your current guidelines, and we went through every page. Now, there is so much duplication, it's not as complicated as it sounds. We then went, first of all, there are these 11 sets of guidelines for 13 corridors. There's also the ordinance that I showed you is 1883, which sets up the power to do this program. And in the ordinance itself, there are a variety of guidelines and standards that were written in there, and they aren't distinguished. They're both. So we went through that and we got the standard, we pulled the standards out that were numerical, and we got that to 5 pages. We then went to the 454 pages and we distilled just guidelines in that of 5 pages and standards 7 pages. So again, even though you call them guidelines, they're guidelines and standards. So 454, most of that is just redundant. It's cut and paste for each section, for each quarter. We then combined the ordinance and the guidelines, the standards from both of those, to 6 pages. And that's what we would suggest when you rewrite the zoning, that you compare that to the zoning, and that instead of people having to go to all these different spots, they just go to the zoning. And then there's 5 pages of guidelines that I mentioned, and we included some of those if we felt they were pertinent. If they dealt with hedgerows, orchards, and things, we did not include those. So we were just doing guidelines. Now, there's a lot of verbiage in those. That's why it was, and there's a lot of redundancy, and that's why we were able to do all that. Each page of all those things we then gave Rodney. If you all want to read all the gory details, they're all there. Okay, so now here's the new set for your consideration. Here are the chapters. There are 11 chapters. I'll just show you some representative pages and graphics for those. And I hope you all had a chance to take a look at them before this evening. Obviously, what are the corridors? Which areas are designated? And we found that there are several that are do not go to historic districts. They go between other corridors. So we don't feel, and that can be the city attorney's call, that those are technically legal under the state legislation, because they don't lead to a historic district. And some of that is those large parcels you see, also the depth of the parcel. I know that was another issue. Do you regulate all the way back into a very large parcel, and particularly a parcel that's not heading to a historic district? So there are 3 of those that's mentioned in there. The second chapter we talk about is actually for the property owner or the business owner to understand the process. Sorry about all the words, but somebody, you've got to tell them how this came about, what the legality is, and what the process is. We then looked at all the building types, which really has not been done in your current guidelines at all. And we tried to break out all the different types. And again, because of the wide variety of the corridors, there's a tremendous variety of building designs relating to their uses. So here's just a sample of restaurants, gas stations, and hotels and motels. So you've got, everything from the historic villages and the Blackburn Inn up to the current motels on the edge and so forth, and all the new restaurants that we see coming on Richmond Avenue in particular. We then did something that we do a lot of, but Kathy came out of our Main Street program, is really how do you upgrade an existing building? And this is what the state of Virginia has given us a contract to do for all these years, is to provide drawings for downtowns. We're just doing the same thing here to show you that happened. The lower project is the left side is the Wendy's as we see it today, the vacant one. And just to show you what can be done working with the property owner. And if you had a grant or loan program that would help, or get the banks to come together and do a loan program. There's so much of that going on in downtowns that we see, and it's been, of course, there's a huge impact. I guess Kathy's probably done 3,000 or 4,000 buildings in Virginia now. They've, one of the old deans of preservation in Virginia said she's done more buildings than any architect in the history of Virginia. New construction, and again, that's what we're seeing most of, at least on Richmond Avenue. I think we'll see more remodeling on Greenville Avenue. And you just saw the updated image that the Long John Silver people did when they had that fire and totally rebuilt. And again, we try to do it for different scales of buildings. Most of them are going to be one story, but you may have some larger ones. The other idea is how to improve economic development is improve your density. And so growing downtown out on large parcels that are vacant or underutilized, or parking lots that were set up for amount of parking that's generally never filled. And that's why a lot of outlots have become popular, because you can have a lot more economic development by putting a business on them than being on the edge of an empty lot. So I suspect that you'll start seeing that as we go out from downtown in the future, that the parking will be reduced and you'll have an opportunity for much more dense development, which in a city bounded by, like we have with these agreements with the counties and are separate, we find it a very wise economic development strategy to take every opportunity to look at all these large parcels that are close in. And we can't tell you how many people come to our office and say, I'd love to live close to downtown. I want to be able to park on the site. I want some outdoor space, and I want it in a historic setting. And we go, well, we can give you one of those or two, maybe. But I think there's a great opportunity to, as Staunton grows, to develop things more densely. Franchise design, we've talked about these three examples on the top, middle, and lower from Staunton. The target on the left is Albemarle County, but the whole idea of breaking scale up, different materials, different colors, different shapes, instead of a blank facade, which adds a lot of architectural interest. It adds a human scale. It's appealing. It's visually attractive. And all the chains are doing it now. You can see just by looking at Wendy's and McDonald's that build are not the Wendy's and McDonald's that are on Greenville Avenue, they're on Richmond Avenue. Everybody's upgrading their image now, and same with those two hotels out there. So it's a new era of more contemporary design, lots of different materials, lots of stone is starting to come in. We're starting to see more wood along with traditional brick. We also do a section on painting and color and finishes that can, again, add a lot of interest to a building and to emphasize entrances and so forth. How do you do a multiple tenant building to make it attractive? Guidelines for signage. Of course, there's a whole monument sign movement now in corridors throughout the country. The pole signs are above most sight lines. They cost a lot more, and they become a visual clutter. And so you're starting to see this sort of development. We're seeing that even here too with the monument sign idea. Awnings and canopies as well. Lots of new materials, glass, metal, all kinds of things are happening, along with traditional fabrics. Private site, and that was a pretty extensive section in your existing guidelines. And most of this is relating to where the building is placed, the parking, the landscaping, and how do they connect? Can they connect internally rather than having to go all the way back out on the corridor and go right in next door and then come back out? Can you have more connectivity? Lighting, we know, has been an issue here. Most corridors that have businesses on them need lighting, want lighting, and demand lighting, and we've been through that. And then solar panels is one of the new technologies. These are Staunton examples. This is on the left is the two pictures of the new bank across from the fire station. It's all solar. And then this is on West Beverly Street using the awnings a business has there that turns into solar panels. Now, so right now, tonight, if you want to take a project and go build it on the corridor, here's where you start. Well, you better go see Rodney and Tim, but you go zoning chapters and read the regulations. What's your zoning? Then you go to look at the supplementary for parking, landscaping, and lighting. Then you go to the corridor overlay ordinance, if you know about it, and you pull that out off the website and you read all the standards and guidelines that are in that. Then you go to the guidelines themselves for your corridor, and you'll see some of the same things, but written with different language in the guidelines that'll also have standards, even though they're called guidelines. And then you go to their corridor guidelines, and some of the corridor guidelines are broken into subsections. However, when you read the recommendations, some of them are so general that I'm not sure how effective it is. And we've been told the staff has really not found that to be that useful. And then beyond that, you have websites and publications you're asked to go read on different aspects like wetlands or some other aspect of land planning that may or may not be up to date any longer. And I'm not sure most property owners are going to go try to find those sources. So we feel that if there's confusion, and we think there is, part of it is the way this system is evolved and designed. Part of it is the duplication, and part of it is confusing standards and guidelines. And then to go through all of that in order to get a project approved is challenging. So these new guidelines are 40 pages. We hope they're user-friendly. We hope they're clearly organized. We hope there are lots of graphics to show property owners what to do, how to do it, what the vision is, what the city would like to be. And we have a lot more guidance on architecture on existing and new buildings than the other standards had. And we don't mix standards in. We try not to. And so we also say it's more flexible, as it has to be. And staff is reasonable and tries to be as flexible within a vision. So what happens next? Well, that's where the zoning regulation review would come into play. And so you would look at what the standards were we pulled out of the existing guidelines, those 7 pages, 6 pages, and see how many of those you want to put in the zoning. Then you would look at each one of the zoning categories and say, does it make sense to have that setback, that height, that requirement for parking, that level of lighting, whatever it might be. And that's where you would update those standards in the zoning. And then you would align those with the guidelines and the vision and goals and your priorities. And then you would adopt both of them. I think together you'd have to, and a new ordinance would have to be amended. The current corridor ordinance would have to be rewritten to a certain extent to reflect what I've just said tonight. And we're not looking for work. We don't rewrite zoning ordinances. So don't want to let you all think that's why we're here. So I'll stop there, and happy to try to answer any questions tonight. As I mentioned before, there was the idea that there would be a public workshop so the community could comment. We could give a more detailed presentation on just the guidelines, not all this process stuff, and show them more details of this document, which is the guidelines. And then we could also put it online and publicize the facts so that people could comment on it and make suggestions for changes, edits, additions, whatever. We're sorry that there hadn't been more opportunity to get community input. We have never have done this where we stop halfway through it and just finish it all without anybody else seeing it. But that was decided, and so this is what we've done.
Questions?
And this still wouldn't include anything that has to do with historic Stanton guidelines. That would be.
That's separate.
Separate.
That's a totally separate document. Yeah. And we updated those a few years ago.
Right.
You know, we did them a long time ago, and then we added downtown. We did residential and commercial. That's a totally different area. They don't overlap. If they do, the historic takes effect. So like, I think one side of Lewis Street is not in the historic district. That comes under these corridor. The other side is, that comes under the historic. There's no overlap.
It's crazy.
Go ahead.
Well, Bill, I'll be honest with you, and I probably want to shock a few of the new ones too, but that was one of the things I ran on, and I am glad to see that you've reduced it. I want to study it some more.
Good.
Bill, you and I are friends.
We are.
But there was a day when I walked into Leslie's office, and she'll remember it, I'm sure. I said, this is getting ridiculous. And I said, if I don't get some kind of action soon, I'm going to walk up here on a meeting and I'm going to make a motion to do away with the whole thing, except for maybe downtown. But I really want to study it because I think at first a lot of that, this is my personal feeling. But I thought it was too many rules and regs, and well, okay, the light's got to be up at 29.6 degrees. And I know Rodney's talked about, a lot of it looking like Williamsburg and having trees all along and different kind of things. And I wasn't for that, but I'm really interested because I haven't had a chance to really look at everything you've done. And the idea that you've dropped it from 400 and some down to 40 and down to, I'm excited about that.
Well, good.
But if I get any questions, I know where to find you. Because like I said,
we go
we've
back
been
a
friends
ways.
for, yes, we do.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
simplification and approachability is a big deal for the people building things in the corridor. But I mean, thank you both for your work over the years so much. I mean, you've been such a part about what makes Staunton the special place and a destination and a great place to live. And I think this is part of us deciding what we want, what everyone wants Staunton to look like on the outskirts and downtown.
Yep.
Thank you.
Further questions? Well, thank you, Bill and Kathy. This is wonderful. I love 40 pages.
So do we, Mayor. Well, if you could give us any also guidance on how, in terms of public input of other, in terms of posting this for comment and publicizing it, and for if you want us to do a public presentation of just the guidelines, that would be nice to know that, so we can schedule that aspect of it.
I think that would be a good
That would
idea
be a good
because
idea.
That'd be wonderful.
when we did the overlays before, I think a lot of businesses bought into it until it affected them. And so, it'd be great to have people, they be aware too, because that's, it's a lot easier when they know about it.
Yeah, it's like when we started doing historic stuff in Staunton, we did public education from 1976 until 95 before there was a historic overlay with an architectural review board. It was all voluntary. Kathy walked around downtown and I said, anytime you see a ladder or a scaffold, go ask them if they can give them a drawing. And it was all voluntarily done. All the facades were done without any regulation.
Because he told me, you get out there and you go talk to property owners every day. We got them to do stuff. I mean.
But until people believe in something, they're not going to necessarily buy into it. So when you drop a regulation out of the sky that's confusing, detailed, and 400 pages long, you're going to get blowback. And
Amen.
if you don't do any public education about it, and if you don't have any other program to go with it, you're just doing another level of regulation. We couldn't get a historic architecture review board in 1976. Are you kidding me? Local architect called the entire wharf a bunch of mongrel buildings, and they should all be torn down. And this was all I did was fight demolitions for the most part in the 1970s.
Fine examples, Harrisonburg. I mean, they had a beautiful downtown and they tore a lot of it down and made parking lots out of it. And, and
They're still doing that.
yeah.
Can I make a statement? We talked about having a vision for the city. And I think when folks think about, you said it's not an ordinary or an average city, and it's not. And I think, we are known as a historic place, and our downtown is a jewel, it's a gem, it's a historic place. But all the corridors, many of the corridors coming in, as you said, the word variability, and that's huge. You know, coming in Richmond Road, you noted the modern architecture, the new hotels are very modern, the new restaurants are very modern. And I'm wondering, you know, coming in West Beverly, coming in Commerce, coming in all these roads, what is it that unites those corridors and gives it the character that's leading into the heart, the core of our city? Because it would be nice to have that one theme that unites, that brings it all together. And I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, and
if anything,
you know, the hint in the old guidelines was, oh, because it's related to historic, those guidelines picked 2 or 3 older buildings on the corridor, which all varied tremendously and weren't historic like downtown, and said, okay, so that's sort of the architectural guide, I guess. There was really very low graphics in your existing ones. We think the reality of development on corridors is not to make it a pseudo historic corridor, obviously. Williamsburg's gonna a lot more of that red brick and the classical colonial stuff with the, you know, pitched roofs and the little window panes. That really is very unique for that city.
And I think, well, I just want, I don't know, is this on? And doing this, I've driven the corridors a lot, and what's so interesting really about all our corridors is they do have different character. Like North Augusta Street is more residential and institutional. And so it's almost looking at the character of that corridor and saying, well, what is the character of that corridor and what things need to happen? Like if you look at West Beverly, certainly there's public improvements that don't come under, you know, that could happen out there to try to pull it together a little bit. And then looking at site design, looking at renovating some of the existing buildings to kind of upgrade them and make them not look so tired. But a lot, when you go around town, because of the zoning, a lot of the front, you know, in front of residential buildings is just paved right to the street. And there's none of that landscaping edge that goes on. And so that's what Bill was referring to. We did work in Lexington for a number of years when they really made a concerted effort to improve their corridors. They got rid of all their pole signs, they landscaped, they did the monument sign, they completely changed the whole experience. But every corridor has a different character, and it's really looking at that corridor and saying, what does it need? So it's just like what he was saying, it's beyond, you have the guidelines, but then you can have incentive programs, you can have design assistance, you can have all sorts of things going on to help people have a vision for, oh my gosh, this is what this could be, you know, and then that helps their business, and it makes it a place that a business wants to locate. So there's a lot more components that go with this to revitalizing corridors, just like downtown.
I think Fredericksburg, don't they, the economic development?
Yep, the economic development.
They give out matching grants. Is that
I think
right?
they had grants then, that's been about 10 years ago, that the economic development, they really went after their corridors and did a lot of work to help property owners fix up their buildings. And we did facade drawings and site drawings to help the property owner envision what could be going on with their property. So yeah, they had a very concerted effort because it was the major corridors coming into their very historic downtown, just like here.
In Rico County, they have a corridor facade improvement, and Kathy's been on call, and they'll call and say, here's this awful one-story cinder block building. What can we do with it? So she's.
But more and more, you're seeing that where, you know, communities have revitalized their downtown, then they're realizing, oh, how do we get there? What is that experience actually getting there? And so a lot of communities are taking that step to try to make corridor improvements. So
I think architectural quality and not having a simple box, but breaking up that scale, mass, color, texture, some kind of landscape edge, but you don't want to hide the parking and hide the buildings. I mean, you go to some places and you can't even find where you want to be. I think that's overkill and is not.
But monument signs, some nice landscaping, but you still want to focus on the building. That's why we put some examples in there, like with signage, how you put it on the building so you can see it from the street. I mean,
actually, you're making the building taller to have a sign you can read better, which sounds, oh, you're saying bigger signs? Well, in some cases, yes. I mean, but it's designed nicely, so it can still fit and work. It all depends on the design. So it's not trying to reduce everything is try to put things in context. So if you have a smaller sign, you can spend a little bit of money on landscaping. A lot of these programs we're talking about, though, the city actually put up, I know Lexington, this has been 20 years ago, $100,000, we'll do the landscaping if you'll do a new sign. That was so successful, they went to the next business quarter and they give $200,000 and they gave those out as matching grants. And the property owners then got excited and they fixed them up. And the planning director, who's now retired, told us, I challenge you to come here and go to any business and tell them, do you like it before or like it now? Everybody was so successful, they moved it to the other quarters politically. But that was their, and I think they did a lot of selling. They went out on the street and talked to the property owners. This is just regulations we're talking about tonight, you know.
I just want to make sure, because I heard you mention earlier residential. I mean, most of this is all.
Yeah,
involving
this doesn't cover resident, I mean, the guidelines don't
All right.
address the resident.
Because I know there would be a lot of pushback
Oh, yeah,
if you
no.
tell residents.
No, it's just that the character of the corridor, there's definitely residential. Yeah, the guidelines don't address. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
No, it's just,
Okay.
no.
Thank you.
And even the cities that, I know some cities in Northern Virginia have gotten their charter changed so they do architectural review on anything but single family or single family townhouse and so forth. But then they regulate everything else, regardless of if it goes to a historic district or not. But they had to change their charter to do that. So we've done guidelines for Falls Church and Fairfax. We just did it for, and we just did it down in Charlotte, and we're getting ready to do Davidson, and they have the same thing in Carolina. They get to review everything except single family residential, and it's in their state enabling. It's a different state, obviously.
Again, it's having
But yeah,
incentives
residential's-
that go along with the regulations and you really see things happening.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you all. Wonderful
Thank you.
presentation. We stand and appreciate
Pleasure.
everything you bring to the table. And
Well, thank you for
Pleasure. Thank you
the
very
nice
much.
comments. We love this community. It's a fabulous community. And it has a sense of community. I think
Yeah.
that's what all this does for us. And hopefully we can continue to
look forward to
doing that. We'll look forward to
Yeah.
working with you all and let us
Working.
know when you want us to do anything else in terms of the workshop and the questionnaire. We worked with Rodney on that.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
night.
Y'all
Have a
take
nice
care.
evening.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you.
I adjourn this work session, and our regular meeting will begin at 7 p.m. Callie, we live? Very good. I'd like to call to order the July 27th, 2023 regular meeting of Staunton City Council. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Tonight's invocation moment of silence will be brought to us by Councilor Arrowood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, often I get into issues of housing inequality and other parts, but I had a kind of a personal experience recently. We were adding a member to our family here, a new pet, and I'd like to urge everyone when you're thinking of adding someone to your family to adopt instead of going to a breeder or a pet shop. Because there are just so many animals out there that need homes. And we went to the Shenandoah Valley Animal Services Center there. I made the mistake of taking my kids with me. We almost left with all of them, but we were able to keep it down to something reasonable. But there are just so many that need homes. So just please consider adopting instead of going to a breeder or something like that. Thank you.
And what is the name of our new addition?
Oh, Well, we have Onyx and Sparky.
It's a good
Yeah,
start.
the kids have, I let them go for the names there. We narrowly avoided Mr. Mew Mew. So, yeah.
I adopted a 9.5-year-old senior.
That's
true.
true. I like that. I like.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Mark brings up a good thing, not just kittens or puppies too. You know, adult animals need homes as well. There are all kinds of great, you know, well-mannered ones too. So.
Was it a cat?
now.
Was it a cat?
Yes.
Was it a cat or a dog?
This was 2 cats. I'm away from the house too much to I don't want to keep a dog in a kennel for very long.
Very good. All right, that brings up the mayor's report, and it seems like it's been a long time since we've had a council session. I believe it was June 22nd, and of course, we've had 4th of July since then. We had a most successful 4th of July festivities. Happy Birthday America went very well, I thought. It was a great turnout, particularly for the parade. And we always take off the first meeting of July, and we're going to take off next meeting, which will be the second Thursday in August. So it's going to be approximately a month before we meet again. So we have a lot to get going here on tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to other members from council. Who have anything to add? A quiet bunch.
Well, let's see. I had a chance to attend an opening at the R. Smith Center. There it was in honor of the Smiths themselves. There they unveiled some portraits that they also talked about the process of bringing that thing along from when it opened in 2007 and before that, and how it was just a abandoned and nearly destroyed building that they brought back to be just a very vibrant community center for arts and education and that. So I'd recommend everybody go by. There's just so many interesting things there with the historical society there as well too. So it's just a great, one of the jewels of the city in there.
Agreed.
Yeah, Mayor Claffey, I took vacation seriously and I hadn't jumped into anything public lately, but today I attended the ribbon cutting of the new YMCA Extension Center over New Hope Road. They broke some ground there, some kids from the Community Child Care Center and staff and board of the YMCA. And for everyone's interest, they're going to be having their summer camps there starting next year. There's going to be a large pavilion with bathrooms and water and cooling centers. They have 2 fields that will be out there so they can play soccer and football, whatever the kids were playing these days. And they're going to have a walking trail, and Lewis Creek runs through that area. So they'll be doing some environmental science down at the creek. So it's just going to be a really, really exciting extension for the YMCA, but they also really want, they're in phase 2 now, and they want public input. So if this is something that is interesting to you, please give Josh Cole a call at the YMCA and give him your input on that project.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you. Next is the approval of minutes. I would entertain a motion.
Mayor Claffey,
Councilor Holmes.
I move to approve the regular meeting agenda as presented.
No, we're doing minutes.
Minutes.
Sorry. I move to approve the work session and regular meeting minutes of June 22nd, 2023 as presented.
All right, a motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Robertson is second. Mr. Kestrick.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, the first item of agenda on the agenda is a public hearing of ordinance to amend the 2024 budget ordinance for the city of Staunton by adding budget amendment number 1. Ms. Boger.
Jesse Moyers, our Chief Finance Officer, is here this evening to walk through this item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Well,
Evening.
This is the first budget amendment of FY '24.
first meeting.
It is the city-only budget amendment. The total is $10,129,762. It does require a public hearing, which you will conduct right after my summary of the amendment. Consideration of the amendment will occur at the next scheduled meeting, August 24th. The general fund portion is $1,315,643, and it includes the following: $1.2 million to appropriate the remaining FY '22 fund balance carryover. This amount will be transferred to the CIP fund. You'll hear more in just a minute on how we're going to use those funds in the CIP fund. $87,705 is for the school resource officer incentive grant. $27,938 for additional fire program funds for FY '24. And then the CIP fund portion is $8,814,119. And it includes the $1.2 million that is being transferred in from the general fund. $776,000 will be for the regional animal shelter. If you remember, during our last meeting, we decided to fund that with local funds instead of using ARPA funds, because if City of Staunton uses federal funds, it will drive the cost of the project up. And then the rest of it, the other $424,000 will be for the JDR Courthouse West End Complex. And then we got a VDOT grant for pedestrian infrastructure that totals $1,111,524. That is for 10 different crosswalks. And then we have a $240,000 VDEM grant for the regional radio project consulting to help with that cost. And then the remaining amount, $6,262,595, relates to the regional radio project. That is because City of Staunton is serving as the fiscal agent for the infrastructure on the project, according to the MOU that was signed on May 9th. And that is the appropriation for the Augusta County and the Waynesboro share of that project. We will be paying the bills for the infrastructure, and we will be reimbursed by those localities. So the revenue on that is recovered cost. So that concludes my review of amendment number 1. I can take your questions now or after the public hearing.
Members of council, do you have any questions?
Not this time.
All right. Then I will open up a public hearing. It is a time for the council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about this specific topic. We ask that you please give your name, your address, and then keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute time limit, I will let you know your time has expired. For any Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on this matter. Once everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, I'll then close the public hearing. I will now open the public hearing if you wish to speak on the budget amendment number 1. Mr. Kester, do we have anybody with their hand raised?
No, sir, we do not.
Anybody like to speak? Questions? Ms. Beauregard, any comments on?
No, sir. We'll take this back to you next month for consideration and the final vote. So.
Very good. All right, that brings us to item B, which is a public hearing and consideration of a request by Kevin Linharris to rezone 1020 North Augusta Street from B1 Local Business District to P1 Professional District. Mr. Rhodes, welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Claffey, City Council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. As the mayor noted in the introduction to this, Kevin Linharris is requesting a rezoning of 1020 North Augusta Street from B1 Local Business District to P1 Professional District. He has recently acquired the property and plans to utilize it as his residence. Under the B1 zoning district, residential use is permitted by right on the floors above the ground level. However, the ground level and basement levels are only allowed by special use permit. However, in the P1 zoning district, single family is a by right use for the entire structure. Therefore, he is applying for the down zoning of the property to P1. Staff has reviewed this request and has identified no issues. This area of North Augusta Street underwent a city-initiated mass rezoning in 2017. Many of the properties on the same block as this property were rezoned at that time from business to professional. However, this property was not included in that rezoning because there was the pregnancy health center was located there at that time. Now that that business has moved out, it is reasonable to move forward with the rezoning of the property. Surrounding zoning includes P1 professional district, R2 low density residential district, and across North Augusta Street is B1 local business district. And the City of Staunton comprehensive plan designates this area as professional, which obviously is consistent with this proposed rezoning. At the Planning Commission's June 15th, 2023 meeting, after conducting a public hearing where no one spoke in opposition to this request, on a 5-0 vote, the commission unanimously voted to recommend approval of the rezoning. I'll be glad to take any questions you have at this time or after you conduct the public hearing.
Does council have any questions?
Just a question, Ronnie, if the property owner were to sell that, and would it be able to be rezoned again for something else? Or would it stay in the residential zoning category?
The request is to rezone it to P1 professional district, so
Right.
that would go with the property. If it is approved by council, a future owner certainly would have the right to request another zoning of it like any
Okay,
other
like any
property
other.
owner.
Okay.
The P1 professional district does allow other professional uses there in addition to residential though.
Is the property owner here?
Yes, sir.
Any
Mr.
comment?
Wynn Harris is sitting here to my left.
Any comments?
Kevin Lynn Harris. I currently reside and own 547 Calvert Street. Live there with my wife and family. We saw this house. It was beautiful. And, went to look to use it as our new primary residence. So the Statler brothers lived or had an office there. I don't know if you all knew that, but very interestingly. Just keeping that in mind, if you all have any questions. Also, my wife is a teacher at Ware Elementary. It's probably too much information. And I work at VDOT in Staunton here. So we're both live and work in Staunton, which is very fortunate for us. So any questions?
And I believe I drove by last night and I saw her out planting some flowers and
Oh my
taking
gosh,
care
you
of it. So
probably did.
thank you. Welcome to Stanton and we
Spent all my
appreciate you.
money.
Any other questions, Mr. Minnears? Well, let me open up this public hearing. Ask that you give your name, address, and keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute limit, I will let you know. For our Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you want to speak on this topic. Once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, I will close the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this matter? Mr. Kesker, has anyone raised his hand?
No, sir.
Last call. Public hearing is closed.
Mayor Claffey,
Counselor Holmes,
I move the council adopt the ordinance and approve the rezoning as recommended by the planning commission.
motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Airwood. All right, Mr. Kesker.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Sure, good luck.
Brings us to item C, which is a public hearing and a consideration of a request by Rebecca Bennett to rezone 916 Anderson Street from R4 High Density Residential District to B2 General Business District Conditional. Mr. Rhodes, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey. As the mayor noted, Rebecca Bennett has applied for rezoning of 916 Anderson Street from R4 High Density Residential District to B2 General Business District Conditional. Ms. Bennett also owns property at 920 West Beverly Street, which is the former location of Christ United Methodist Church. She plans to convert that property into an event space and proposes to use 916 Anderson Street for off-street parking. The B2 zoning district will permit the use of 916 Anderson Street for that off-street parking. The applicant has proffered that if this property is rezoned to B2 General Business District, that a parking lot would be the only permitted use on that property. Therefore, all the other uses that are generally in the B2 district would not be permitted. So only a parking lot could go there if this was approved. The 920 West Beverly Street property is a large historic property with very little off-street parking. And as far as on-street parking, there's a little bit on the north side of West Beverly Street. However, of course, there's other competing uses for those parking spaces. If 920 West Beverly Street is to be reused for a purpose other than a single-family dwelling, additional parking is needed and is required by the zoning ordinance. And the proposed conditional rezoning is a way to provide this additional parking. In the application, there was a conceptual plan of how this parking would be laid out. I would note that if this was approved, a site plan would need to be submitted to meet all this city requirements, and that would address, among other things, landscaping, lighting, screening, stormwater. All that would need to be reviewed and approved later. All of the surrounding zoning is R4 High Density Residential District. The comprehensive plan designates this area as neighborhood residential. And while the rezoning and the use of the property as a parking lot is not supported by the land use and development guide of the comprehensive plan, the parking lot would support the reuse of the nearby historic property. I would note that city staff received numerous emails in the 24 hours prior to the planning commission meeting. And I've included, I believe, 8 emails. We also received 2 phone calls, all in opposition to this proposed rezoning. Staff's briefing for the June 15th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting recommended endorsement of the requested conditional zoning. While staff would not generally support rezoning property to business that's surrounded by residential zoning, that's basically spot zoning, but due to the limited nature of the proposed conditional zoning, it would only be used as a parking lot, and that it would permit the redevelopment of a long neglected property on West Beverly Street. Staff supported that application. At the Plan Commission's June 15, 2023 meeting, Plan Commission conducted a public hearing, and during the public hearing, 5 people spoke in opposition to the request. And those that spoke noted that the proposed parking lot was not compatible with the neighborhood residential area, and that the narrow residential streets were not adequate to handle the additional traffic from a commercial use. And on a 5-0 vote, the commission concurred with the residents and unanimously voted to recommend denial of the rezoning. I'll be glad to take any questions you have at this time or after you conduct a public hearing. The applicant is here also to address council.
At this time, are there any questions from council?
Everyone, how would you make that lot a parking? It is like almost V-shaped. It's got such a drop on it. I mean, it just seems like it would be hard to make a parking lot out of it.
Well, like I said, a site plan would need to be submitted, and that would show how it would be graded, cut, filled, whatever would be necessary in order to develop for that proposed use. And that would have to be reviewed and approved.
Further questions from council?
May I ask the applicant, when you said event space, what What kind of events? What do you plan on doing with that building?
Okay, you want to save that for the applicant?
Yes, for the applicant.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, just to Rodney? Okay, let's hear from the applicant, please. Welcome.
Good evening. Conceptual drawing. part. About 22 spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rebecca Bennett and I own 916 Anderson Street along with 920 West Beverly Street. When I looked at the United Methodist Church, thank you. When I looked at the United Methodist Church, I knew that immediately that I had to solve the parking issue because there's not a whole lot of parking on front of West Beverly Street in front of the building. The building is 115 years old. It is in the historic district and it has been sadly neglected and abused for decades. And so I was drawn to try to bring this building back to life. And so that's what I'm attempting to do. I've had to solve the water issue off West Beverly Street at the tune of $25,000 just to protect the property. And so at some point in time, I would like for the property to become a family event center. So I'm talking about, birthdays, weddings, community type stuff for families. I'm not talking about, music concerts or anything outrageous, bars or anything else like that. And so when I met with the real estate agent, she actually contacted people around in the development about, what the accessibility of parking was on the backside of the street, since there was none on West Beverly Street. And the first person she spoke to was Lance with Habitat. And he was the one that informed me through my realtor that those properties were coming up for a tax auction soon. So I went ahead and committed to the building. And, there's quite a bit of work that I've been doing in the meantime, trying to get the front looking nice and trying to get some of the glass on the front of the building looking nice, trying to get the water issues, resolved and structural issues, because the interior of the building was probably pretty close to caving in because there was a lot of water damage, a lot of termite damage. The last owner did as much damage to the building as the elements. And so I've had to straighten out a lot of issues, from that. But this is just a small parking lot and my building is going to be limited to the use of the parking that I can provide. So I'm not talking about adding additional parking to, Anderson Street or additional parking to West Beverly, because all of that stuff can be, in a contract with anybody that tends to rent out the space for whatever family gathering that they want to do in that space. Anderson Street is 30 feet wide. It does have a sidewalk that goes down the left side. Let's see what else can I tell you about that. So there's never been any issues, even during the construction, with getting equipment in there or getting large trucks in there. And nobody has had any issues as far as, anybody's cars being damaged, getting stuff in and out of there. The trash truck comes through there, the fire truck comes through there. So it's not as narrow as some people would like for you to believe. But we're talking about 22 spaces. We're not talking about 50 or 100. It's not like I'm trying to make a large impact in the neighborhood. There is a huge 25-foot easement, sewer easement, the city of Staunton owns through the middle of the property. It makes it very limited to even trying to build any size residential structure on those two lots. And as far as trying to, make sure that the drainage, would be right above where the city of Stanton drain pipe runs through the property. And then small retaining walls on the sides so that it doesn't affect the side lot owners. Fencing, so, that it doesn't encroach on the lot owner. There's only one lot owner right now. And so it's, little bit of this, a little bit of that, and dress it up some, with some retaining walls and stuff. It's not going to be that big of an impact. There's already street lighting on Anderson Street, so lighting is not an issue. I did meet with Mr. Rhodes after the last meeting, and one of the questions that he kind of posed to me was, the chicken and the egg. What came first? Did the church come first, or did the lots come first? And so I did some legal research, and I've given everyone a package.
Yeah, we all have. them.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, Sorry.
And so anyway, Mr. Bodley, you should have the deed there, but the actual plat is here on this side. So Bodley designated the church building prior to designating any lots, because on the bottom left corner of the plat, you'll notice that dotted lines are indications of proposed building lots. So that's your first. Document there. And so any questions regarding the lot or the parking lot? I move on to a couple other issues.
You're looking at making the lot like gravel? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, because I was asked to make it so in such a way, but we haven't gotten through all the details yet on, with the planning department, what it has to be done. But gravel would be something, if it ever turned back into residential and the church no longer existed, then it can certainly be turned back into residential lots. But there's 2 lots there, and they're very narrow. All the lots on Anderson Street are very narrow. And so what used to be the, standard in the building code of building up next to the property line, because of the limitations on the front offsets and the side offsets and this large 25-foot easement that runs through the middle of it, you're talking about a very small multi-residential use building that could even be put on it.
And do you have parking behind the church? It looked like there was only a space there for me.
There's parking on the side of the church, and it's about 7, it'll be about 7 or 8 lots.
How many people, what size events are you planning on doing? Like up
I'm
to
limited
50?
to the parking. I'm limited. The building capacity is 338 people according to the architect. The load capacity of the building with the structural repairs is about 159. With the parking, we're talking about 60 people maximum for the building. And I truly don't want a lot of people inside that building, because I don't want the building torn up.
And you wouldn't be planning on having events where there'd be alcohol or anything like that? So
I had no intention, because, that's something, I guess, when I go to rezone the church, because right now it's considered multi-use residential building. All of the lots to the left of the church up to Newtown Bakery are all zoned commercial currently. So that neighborhood is actually mixed use. There has been businesses in that block. The Anne Hathaway house had a tea house there. Newtown Bakery was there, and they used to play music on Friday and Saturday nights. I mean, I've been in the Newtown district since 2010. So I'm aware that, of the activities there. There's a large Airbnb in the church across the street from the church, you know, so it's a business. All the way down West Beverly Street, after you pass Newtown, you've got the computer place, is mixed business and residential all the way down to 262. So I didn't think it was something that would be, you know, out of the ordinary to invest in this property.
It's a beautiful building, and I mean, I was looking, I read over and looked, and I've seen things go on Anderson over the years, because it used to be a pretty rough little street, and they've really cleaned it up quite a bit.
Yes.
And I tell you, I don't know if me personally, it looked like it'd be hard for it to handle that much traffic. And
20 cars.
27 cars, you know, that'd be, I mean, a lot of times if somebody's parked on the side of the street, it's hard to get past them, you know, in some of those areas, you know, especially when you get up where you turn around and come back. I mean, that's a really, really narrow little street. So I don't know, me personally, I just think it's a little bit tight as far as the street goes. And it's really hard to have people who might not park on the street just because, you know, maybe it's not against the law for people to come to an event to park on the street. I know personally from having my business, I get in trouble sometimes for people park in front of Mr. Elder's car place because they blocked his doors. So sometimes I'm having to go out and try to find out who parked stuff. So I don't know that you know, it would be a little bit, I think it would be tight in that area personally. You know,
The lots is only one house between the lot and Stafford Street. And
yeah, but it would be parking coming in and out. I mean, I think that would be, I mean, people coming in and out of the street, it would limit, because it's almost right in the middle of that block. I mean, it's there's what, 4 houses in the curve, or 5, then 2 more, 4 more on Anderson. So that's, you know, that's like 9 houses in that area that it would affect just if people parked on the street. And I know you say they're going to park in the lot, but I'm just wondering if how would you enforce that? You know, it's kind of,
it would be in the contract. But all of my neighbors directly around the church had put in letters of support that would be directly affected.
You said neighbors around the church or neighbors
Yes.
around the parking lot?
Well, it's both.
So your neighbors have all, because we've had a lot of letters, you know, in opposition. That's why I was wondering.
Yes, and I can go over a couple of those, but there's another thing I wanted to kind of go over before then.
Go ahead. You said you had something else you wanted to go over.
Oh, okay. One of the issues I've had with Ms. Fuller that's actually next door, I provided you all with a photograph of the house that used to be on that lot. And originally the lot that's next to Mrs. Fuller's used to be 45 feet. And in 1987, her father took 20 some feet in exchange for 5 feet with Mrs. Wade, who was actually the previous owner of the lot that I purchased at 916. And then I've had a problem with the dog kennel. I've tried for 2 years to get her to move it, and she refuses to move it. And then there's a copy of the letter from the zoning people in the city of Staunton. And so at this point, Mrs. Fuller is attacking both property owners on either side of her. And that was a copy of some of the complaints that she's been filing. So Ms. Fuller wouldn't be happy with anybody, whether it's a house or a parking lot.
So is there a kennel on your land?
Yes. Yes, and that's the letter that's package that's signed by
Is it the whole kennel or part of the kennel?
just part of it.
Rodney, I have a question. Is the lot in question, it's mentioned that we're going to put gravel on it if it's going to be used as a parking lot. Is gravel allowed on a parking lot or does it need to be paved?
Gravel is allowed.
No, no, ma'am, it is not.
Oh,
It has to be of a sealed surface. So there's different types of sealed surface. Gravel does not meet the sealed
Rodney,
surface.
can you come up to the mic, please?
It would have to be of a sealed surface. And there's different types of surfaces that meet that criteria, but gravel is not one of them.
Also, thank you.
Gil Coleman with Coleman Engineering, assisting on engineering. Been standing here passing things, but that's.
Thank
You're welcome.
If I may answer that question.
Sure.
She spoke of, not putting pavement there to avoid any future development, to having to dig that up and all that. It has to be built according to specs, either way, gravel by itself cannot be used, but a sealed gravel, perhaps there are different treatments that can be used that will be less, easier to remove at a later date if needed. And I'm here to answer any other questions related perhaps to the parking lot itself, not the use that is for you all to decide, but the parking lot and how it's built and stormwater and all that, those things can be addressed through engineering. So.
Thank you.
I do have a question about the lot because the parking lot. Sorry, I just, if you put a like a paved surface or something there, isn't it, it's gonna cause a lot of runoff into both lots on either side. So I would just wonder how you would alleviate that.
Yeah, it just happens that there is a large stormwater pipe running through the site, so we can tie directly into that pipe. Any runoff will be directed into an inlet within the property, so it wouldn't go in outside properties.
Mayor Flatley,
Mr. Blair,
we need to call this for
yes, we've reached the 15-minute time limit for the applicant presentation.
Very good. Anything else? Well, then we're about to enter into a public hearing. I'm going to.
I'm sorry, I have one more question
All right.
for Mr. Rhodes. So Ronnie, can you explain the process? If this is approved, then it goes to the site plan review. And what is in, what all, just tell me what all that requires.
Okay, if this is approved, the zoning of the property, they would need to submit a formal site plan. That is an administrative review process. There's about 8 different city staff folks that review that, from the fire marshal to the building official to the city's horticulturist to Pete Kesker, the stormwater manager, city engineer, 3 or 4 people in public works, and of course, planning and zoning staff. So it's a very in-depth review of a professionally prepared site plan by a certified engineer.
And if the applicant can't make the adjustments or the requirements according to that, whatever is in that plan, then it's not going to happen.
That's correct. It doesn't get approved and doesn't get constructed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Although you didn't ask the question, the property where the old church was, that would have to be rezoned also. It's in the briefing, but I didn't mention that in my presentation. That would have to be rezoned to business before there could be an event space. But until they can address the parking for an event space, they cannot go through that rezoning. So I know there's some questions going back and forth about how that property would be utilized, how that building would be used, and how many people would be there. those questions, council certainly could ask in detailed, those kind of detailed questions if that rezoning comes before you later.
Thank you.
Rodney, I have one more question. You presented us with
Give her
some
a chance.
letters.
Do something with that.
People who, do we have an idea where did these people live on Anderson Street or did they just were, because I'm reading through some of the letters, I don't remember looking for this, but very few of them say they live there. That's why I was wondering.
The vast majority of the emails that we received, if not all of them, are from that same area. I know I received a couple phone calls from people beyond that area that spoke against it.
Okay, I'm about to open up a public hearing. We ask that you please give your name, your address, keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. If you reach the 5-minute mark, I will let you know that your time limit has expired. For our Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on this matter on the 916 Anderson Street. At this point, once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, I will then close the public hearing. At this point, the public hearing is open. Anyone like to speak on 916? Please line up.
Brenda Mead, Sherwood Avenue. I don't live in the neighborhood, but I have visited the area frequently. Habitat for Humanity and the folks who live in that neighborhood have worked very hard to upgrade, up tier. You know, they build new houses. It's brought the neighborhood back. And this street, Anderson Street, is a loop. So if people are going in and out of this parking lot, they're going to be either faced with, you know, incoming traffic, or they're going to have to be turned into the Anderson Street into the loop in order to get around. And that's going to increase traffic in that neighborhood at the end of Anderson Street. And I really think it would be a shame to degrade the neighborhood that's worked so hard to come back and to ignore the investment that people have made to make Heidenreich, Stafford Street, West Johnson Street, Anderson Street, places that are livable, where they can raise their children and where they can live in peace. And so I'm very much against this rezoning for those reasons.
Mr. Kester.
No, sir.
Come in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosa Fuller. I live at 920 Anderson Street. My dad bought that house back there in 1971. Okay, so I've been on that block for a very long time. It's a narrow block. People come on, you got to move over or stop to let them in or let them out, whatever. Now, I'm next door to her lot. It's not going to work. I left my home in New York to take over my dad's home after he passed. I came down here for peaceful living, quiet street. Put a parking lot there, a lot of lighting there. It's not going to work. Understand Habitat going to build a new home next to her parking lot. So her parking lot between the new home and me. Understand there's kids coming to the block. Haven't been no small children on that block in years. So if you put a parking lot there, kids out there in the street playing or whatever they may be doing, they ride fast enough on that block as it is. So a parking lot, no. Drainage, we got a bad drainage system over there now. When it rains, on the other side of me, I floods out because my neighbor raised their yard up. They went over to when Habitat were building them houses, they went over there, they stole dirt, rocks, whatever they could to make their yard up. And all that runoff runs into my yard underneath of my house. I got that problem on that side. I don't need a problem on the other side. Yes, my dog kennel is one pole is 4 inches over the line. I had somebody come this morning to move it. They could move it because she got her car parked there. Okay, She even done called the cops on the guys that come and cut my grass. She got an order of protection for them to not, no trespassing. When she cut that big tree down in her yard, she didn't move it, all that logs. I don't like snakes. I had my guys to come and cut from my walkway in the front, all the way over to hers, all the way to the back. I had permission to do that. She got mad at me for one reason one day and called the cops on them. The cops didn't want to give them no citation for that, for cutting grass. But she's out there in the street going crazy. So the cop didn't have no choice but to give them a citation. Me and her, yeah, we go at it. She stands up in that church like she's something, take pictures of everybody that comes and goes. You know, she's nosy. What she's doing now, we would not have no peace on Anderson Street. None, because I don't. Sometimes I wish I had stayed in New York. I had more peace in New York than I have here. But that is my family home. I'm the last one of my father's kids, and I expect to come down here to live in peace, not to be harassed by her or my neighbors next door. Yeah, I got a problem with my neighbors next door because they put a fence up and I told them that they was on me. I had my place surveyed twice. You think they moved their fence? No. You know what they told me? What about it? So now I got to spend money to take them to court to get them to take their stuff off my property. So I'm between a rock and a hard place. They got my back up against the wall. I even told some police officers that came to the house more than once. I told them, you can back me up against that wall one day and I'm coming out swinging. So I don't think it's fair. I am against that parking lot. There was a house there. Only thing was on that lot that I remember coming up was a lot. It was a house. It had 3 bedrooms upstairs, a 4 bathroom. It had a kitchen, dining room, and a living room, and a backyard, and a driveway. That's all. That's all was on that lot. And yeah, her name was Miss Wade. And when she bought the lot, for me to keep my mouth closed about her parking lot, she offered to give me some of her property on that side where my dog kennel is. I went against it. She went against me. I don't need your property. My dad gave me enough. So I'm just saying, no, I'm against that parking lot. I'm next door. I don't want them lights in my house. I like sleeping in complete darkness. I don't even like to hear the noise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kester? No, sir.
Oh, you got any questions?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Next.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Casey Rolfe. I live at 907 West Johnson Street. And I'm here to express my strong opposition to the request made by Rebecca Bennett to rezone 916 Anderson Street. I'm a homeowner in Staunton and I can see the property in question from my house. I first want to bring up the point of environmental costs associated with just building the parking infrastructure. The creation and maintenance of parking spaces consume a considerable amount of energy and result in the emission of pollutants. As city code would say, it would have to be a sealed surface. The primary material used in parking lots is asphalt, which has its own environmental implications, not to mention the use of the petroleum products and the tar and binding agents. Non-point source pollutants such as motor oil, plastic grocery bags, fertilizers, detergents, and sediments are known to contaminate stormwater runoff, posing a significant threat to aquatic ecosystems in the United States. Because parking lots often lack efficient drainage systems, this leads to flooding and water contamination. Parking lots are also known to contribute to the urban heat island effect, which raises temperatures by 4 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 to 6, not 46. Urban heat islands occur when common construction materials, such as those used in parking lots, absorb and retain more heat from the sun than natural minerals in rural areas. This results in surfaces that reach much higher temperatures than those covered with vegetation or soil. As a result, urban heat islands contribute to higher temperatures in cities, leading to a greater demand for non-renewable resources, such as air conditioning. In reference to the narrow lots, I don't think Ms. Bennett has been paying attention to the magic that Habitat has worked on Stafford Street. I'll move on from that point. When we prioritize the needs of cars over the density of the city, we're allowing parking lots to occupy valuable land while contributing nothing to the tax base. This results in more driving, less housing, and fewer amenities that make urban living worthwhile. The Valley already faces a housing shortage crisis, which is exacerbated by the lack of available inventory. Putting a parking lot where a house should be does nothing to mitigate this problem. Moreover, the proposed parking lot may negatively impact the existing residents like Ms. Fuller of this neighborhood. Parking lots can attract illicit activities. We've already mentioned the light and the noise pollution created just by the vehicles that would be there. Parking lot lights, car alarms, people in and out at night. If the parking lot fills, residents are going to have to deal with overflow parking in front of their homes, people turning around in or parking in their driveways. And lastly, it is essential to consider the historical disenfranchisement of this neighborhood. While I appreciate and admire and support historic building rehabilitation, it is inappropriate to take land from this neighborhood that is made for housing and turn a profit. That is gentrification. If Ms. Bennett is concerned about venue parking, maybe she should consider the possibility of reaching out to the neighbor at the old Dunsmore Business College that's falling in on itself. They make a great parking deck, I'm just saying. And I would also like council to note that this is a prime opportunity to collaborate on a more robust public transportation system within the city of Staunton. In conclusion, a parking lot in my neighborhood and that of my neighbors is not what we envision when we think of a residential neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Kester,
No, sir.
anyone else like to speak?
Hi there, my name is Emily Holt. I am the owner at 934 West Beverly Street. So I have a unique perspective because West Beverly Street is my address, but the back of my house is on Anderson Street. So I park on Anderson Loop. That's where my property, the edge of it's right there. So very impacted by putting a parking lot back there. As many of our previous speakers have noted, the loop is incredibly small, very narrow. I don't know, have you all gone to go look for yourself before today? Okay, good. Because you never know day to day what's going to happen, who's going to be parked where, if you're going to be able to get out as it is today. Some days you go out there, someone's blocking, there's trees being cut, you can't leave. So thinking of adding a parking lot into that equation, and already when you look at the Stafford onto Anderson Street turn, incredibly dangerous. You have to creep up to it as it is now. The West Beverly on the Stafford, either way, turning out or turning in, incredibly unsafe both ways. You have to creep out at a almost 90-degree angle on that hill. It's very unsafe. And then going from Stafford to Johnson, again, quite unsafe. So adding traffic to an area that's already very tough to navigate for the people that live back there. It's not safe. It's not a good idea. Even with me living back there the last 3 years, I've seen cars get stuck on the loop, cars hit other cars and take off. No parking and people parking, blocking other people in. This is routine. This is part of what we see routinely now. So adding a parking lot where people may not know where they're going, getting stuck on the loop, or even having an accident and trapping everybody on Anderson Loop so that they cannot leave to get where they need to be is a serious concern for everybody on the loop. So we made a lot of great points, before this time as well, but it's a glorified alley back there. It is there, that you have to get over if someone's coming, and even then it's difficult. I had to back all the way down Stafford the other day to let somebody out. So, and that was just one person leaving. So thinking of 20 cars leaving and trying to back down Stafford to give enough room is just, it seems silly to even think that this is doable. So any questions for me before I leave? All right. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, my name is Lance Barton. I live at 525 Oak Hill Road, nowhere near Anderson Street. But I am the director of Habitat for Humanity. And since I've already been introduced to this meeting, I would like to make sure that my point of view and that of the organization is very clearly made, is that Habitat for Humanity has invested $2.7 million within 250 feet of the proposed parking lot. We in no way whatsoever support a parking lot in the middle of this neighborhood that is a residential neighborhood as far as we are concerned. As far as Lance Barton's opinion on the parking lot, I'm very much in line with Habitat because I would not want to live next to a parking lot if it were my choice. We do intend to build a house next to the proposed parking lot. We have a young family going in there with a child with disability. We do not think it would be advantageous for them to live next to this. But what I encourage you as the leader of Habitat for Humanity is to consider the voice of the people who have changed the neighborhood, period. They are going to pay that bill. They're going to live there, and they are going to make the changes in that neighborhood that we have benefited from for the last 20 years, since those first houses were built on Cochran and Vickers. I very much appreciate you listening to the public and the people around that proposed parking lot and hearing their opinion. Nobody has reached out to me or Habitat to express their interest of putting a parking lot in there. Let me make that really clear. What I think is the great violation in this conversation is that if you put a business in a residential area, you are forced, and don't I know this personally, to become partners with those neighbors. If you choose to take a dump on that relationship, it is going to have ramifications. We have not been invited to the table. We have been told this is the table we want. Fortunately, we have a voice in what that looks like. And I thank you.
Hello, I'm Machtel Schameyer. I live at 940 West Beverly, and we look out on Anderson. And I think everything has been said about it, so I'm going to keep it short, but I want to make sure that you know that Johan Westenberg and I are very much opposed to this whole project for all the reasons that you've heard before. That's it.
Jessica?
No, sir, I have no one with their hands raised.
I'll take a few moments to speak. My name's Anton Martz. I'm not a resident of Staunton. I'm a resident of Augusta County. I used to live at 925 Trout Street. I'm a business guy. I'm a contractor. Pretty much an investor in the community as a whole. I'm in here to support my mother-in-law, Becky Bennett. Greatly understand the community's opinions. I feel like somebody needs to stand here and speak on with support her as well. I would like to state a couple of, I guess, sites that I see. One, she is bringing business into the community. You know, the West End, there's been lots of talks over the years about how to rejuvenate that area. You know, it's unfortunately we lost Newtown Bakery for whatever those reasons are. So I think she's doing a wonderful thing from the community, but also an economical point of view to bring in investment and money. And, you know, she's doing amazing work at rejuvenating that building at the church. For the parking lot situation, which is on Anderson Street, nobody has spoken about the Hathaway House down there. I believe that is zoned as commercial. I could be incorrect. It's outside my forte. But they have an entrance or an exit on the backside of that loop that nobody in here that has brought to, at least they're concerned about that. So what's to stop the owners of that property to use that as a commercial right of way? To the point of the street's dimensions or width and the concerns of congestion, it doesn't matter if she puts a parking lot there or not. There's always going to be that congestion if there's an accident that is blocking that roadway. It's a one-way street because of the Hathaway residence at the end. So I think that argument is negated. But I do think, like, if the council or the city or the residents on that street have concern with the dimensions of that road, maybe we should take it upon ourselves to see if that road is up to standard as is before anyone else invests any type of, whether Habitat invests in new residential structures or my mother-in-law is going to put a parking lot in there. And I believe, oh, I got a timer. You know, we're talking about a parking lot that is being there. It's not a brick and mortar commercial building. From talking to my mother-in-law, and this isn't in writing, but it's going to be like a weekend use event center. Like the weekend traffic is going to be, you know, Friday, Saturday, possibly Sunday, but all throughout the week, it's normal operations for that street access as it is. We're talking about 22 cars at the most. Has anyone done a traffic study on that street anyways to see what the traffic is? My guess is no, but it might be something that whether Becky looks into or the city looks into to based upon some factual information instead of the opinions of speaking about it's busy. What's going to make it even more busier? Well, let's do a traffic analysis and see what it actually looks like and make some actual measurements of the roadway instead of just opinionated statements. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I would just want to see her be successful at her business and what she's done for that area. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Johan Westenberg. I live at 940 West Beverly Street. I spoke at the Planning Commission and would like to restate my strong opposition to having a parking lot on the Anderson Loop. At the last time that we spoke about this at the Planning Commission, I had spoken with Bruce Shiflett, who is a city police officer, and he keeps track of the amount of accidents that happen in that neighborhood within a 6 months period. And I'm scrambling to find the photograph that I had gotten from that letter. Here it is. So Johan, I searched our records management system for crash reports for 2022 and 2023. This covers crash reports from January 1st, 2022 to June 15th, 2023. Crashes at Stafford and Beverly Street, 5. Crashes at the intersection of Stafford and Anderson, 2. Crashes at the intersection of West Beverly and Montgomery, 3, which isn't really relevant, and then crashes at Heiendreich and Stafford, 0. I want to just respond to the idea that the people who live adjacent and nearby to the church are spewing opinion. It's really important that we're not spewing opinion. It's not an opinion. There are crashes that happen. There are high-speed people who come through Beverly Street. There's backups on Anderson Loop. And then I'm not an engineer, but I drive a truck onto Anderson Loop all the time. I have a 16-foot box truck. That's a tricky maneuver to get it backed into my property. I'm a good driver, so I can do that. And I'm sure the garbage man is a good driver too, and he can do that every Thursday. To assume that people who are renting a facility, whether they're family people, whether they're church-going people, whether they're Martians, it doesn't matter. People who are not from that neighborhood are not used to that traffic. We see people on that loop frequently who are not used to that traffic, and they get upset, and they go whizzing around at speeds that are probably well over 15 miles an hour, which, by the way, is the posted speed limit on that section of West Beverly Street. I also want to counter this idea that somehow everybody, I can only speak for myself, I'm a businessman too. And I spend a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of money with my wife investing in Staunton. And when we bought 940 West Beverly Street, we didn't think about, that this was a commercial property, but we understand that it is a commercial listing, and we use it as a house. Those things may change, but we also understand that whatever we do with that piece of property has to be conforming to the restrictions that are already in place. The parking is awful on West Beverly Street, so you're not going to be able to do a B&B. And I understand that the Allen Church across the street is used as a B&B, and people fight for parking, and get frustrated about it. But, that's 4 cars on a weekend, maybe 2, maybe 1, I don't know. 20 cars is a lot of traffic. And even if it is just on the weekend, it's a lot of impact. And that's not an opinion, that's just a fact. One other point, when the Swensons bought Hathaway House and built that from the ground up, they had sold it at one point to an innkeeper, and that innkeeper was forced to put in a fully asphalt driveway. So for anyone here to say that somehow gravel is going to cut the mustard, that's just not true. And the Swensons have that paved parking lot because it was sold as an inn, and the city council made them put in that sealed surface lot. So these are not opinions, these are just the facts. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Kessler.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else wish to speak? Public hearing is closed.
Mayor Claffey?
Any further questions? Go ahead.
I move that council deny the requested rezoning as recommended by the Planning Commission.
I have a motion to deny. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and second. Any discussion?
I would just like to say one thing. We really do appreciate what you're doing with that property. And we do not want to try to discourage you, but you have to take into account all the people that live on that street and stuff. And I personally have been up and down that street so many times over the years, and especially at night, taking somebody home, and it's a very narrow street, and it could easily see if you put 20 or 30 cars in the mix, it could really cause some accidents, especially at night. And I again, I appreciate what you've done with that building, and I've looked at that building over the years since I've been here, and it's really great. And I'm just sorry that we could not approve this, or I don't know that we have voted yet. Terry, we got a
motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
No.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And again, we appreciate the fact that you're working on the Beverly Street property, and we wish you well with it. Brings us to item D, a consideration of a resolution authorizing the adoption of the fiscal year 2023 annual action plan for the city of Staunton through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Program Fund. Ms. Beauregard,
Helpful. Mr. Billy Vaughn is here to walk through that item tonight.
welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Good evening.
Madam Vice Mayor, members of council. This is our 5th year as a HUD entitlement community. And I'd like to say that each year we've come before council for approval of the annual action plan and that document and our whole program. And my mind has been very beneficial to the nonprofits that we partner with to help them complete their vision of assisting low moderate income individuals or the elderly. And so tonight, 5th year, this is the first year that I did not participate in the development of the annual action plan. I give all credit to that woman back there, Rebecca Joyce, our housing planner, and of course, our HUD consultant, Kate Molinaro, who's with us tonight, and they will be presenting the plan to you for your consideration. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council people. This is my first time speaking in front of you all as a staff person, so I'm a little nervous. So I'm going to read what I wrote. Normally I just wing it, but I was too nervous to do that. So I have now worked for the city for a little over 2 months, and the time has gone by so quickly. The 3 words I would use to describe my experience so far are appreciative, impressed, and amazed. I am so appreciative of all the city staff, and anyone I have come in contact on the city staff has been so kind and helpful as I learn the ropes. That's very appreciative I am. Daily, I'm impressed at what an asset to the city the Community Development Block Grant Program is. Thanks to Mr. Vaughn's hard work over the past 4 years, much of which was in the middle of a pandemic, a program has been created that provides many positive direct benefits to our community. The CDBG program's budget is modest, but its results make a significant impact. I'm also impressed with Kate Molinaro, who we'll hear in just a minute, and M&L. Their knowledge and guidance have assisted the city in starting its block grant journey on the right foot from the very beginning. Lastly, I'm amazed at the service providers and nonprofits that serve as subrecipients who receive funding through the program. As I have met with these organizations, I leave my visits amazed at how they utilize the small amounts of funding they receive to provide desperately needed services to our community. Kate is now going to give you all an update on the CDBG program, what has been accomplished and what is ahead of this coming year. Please listen carefully. It is my hope you will also be impressed and amazed by what this program does for our community, especially for its most vulnerable citizens. So I'm going to turn it over to the expert. Kate.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As Billy mentioned, my name is Kate Molinaro. I'm the Director of Community Development for Mullen & Lonergan Associates, and we've been working with Billy and city staff for the last 4 years since the city was informed that it would become a HUD entitlement in 2019. That process involved the development of a 5-year strategic plan. This involved extensive stakeholder outreach with city departments, affordable housing providers, homeless service providers, and other social service providers in the city. We couple that stakeholder consultation with a housing market analysis and a homeless needs assessment to inform a strategic plan that guides the city's spending for the 5-year period for 2019 through 2023. Annually, then, we prepare the action plan, which identifies the specific activities that the city will undertake with its community development block grant funding in each of those years. The consolidated plan identified the following goals. Again, these were developed after extensive stakeholder outreach. At the top of the list, of course, is to improve access to and quality of affordable housing in the city, providing public services, improving public facilities and infrastructure, economic development initiatives, and then planning and administration. These dollars are used to support the city's staff to implement the activities. Just really quickly, these are some of the basic CDBG eligible activities for the program. The city has directed its dollars over the last 5 years to housing rehabilitation activities, public facilities and infrastructure improvements, as well as public services. To date, I thought we would review what the city has been able to accomplish the last 4 years with its first 4 allocations. We've been able to partner with Renewing Homes of Greater Augusta to provide housing rehabilitation for 10 low-income homeowners. The Valley Program for Aging Services has provided meals to 454 unduplicated elderly and disabled households in the city, rides for 130 unduplicated elderly and disabled individuals, also provided through the Valley Program for Aging Services. Blue Ridge CASA has provided advocacy services for 123 neglected and abused youth through their court-appointed special advocate program. Blue Ridge Legal Services has provided civil assistance for 52 households in the city, primarily for housing-related cases. Valley Supportive Housing also was able to rehab their building on Calorama Street. They replaced the roof. And the city most recently used CDBG dollars to replace water line along Rockaway Street, improving service to 1,570 residents. In addition to the, we'll call it the regular CDBG dollars, in 2020, the city was the recipient of about $322,000 in supplemental CARES Act funding. These were funds that were directed to activities that prevent, prepare, or respond to the coronavirus. With those dollars, the city's been able to provide emergency rental and utility assistance to 87 households through the Salvation Army, another 43 households through the Community Foundation. The Salvation Army was also able to assist 537 individuals through their food bank. Blue Ridge Legal Services also provided legal assistance to 6 households that were facing eviction as a direct result of the pandemic. Valley Mission was able to expand their shelter operations, serving 260 individuals. And the Valley Program for Aging Services was able to provide at-home test kits for individuals participating in their Meals on Wheels program. Ongoing projects that the city has currently, there is funding reserved for Habitat for Humanity for their A Street Aging in Place project. This would provide infrastructure to support the creation of new affordable housing units, the Beverly Street sidewalk improvement, as well as renovations at the Salvation Army's facility, including those to their kitchen and gymnasium. I did want to bring up one compliance measure. Every year, the city is, HUD conducts a test on the city's timeliness, so how quickly they're spending down their dollars. This test is conducted in August of every year, and the city can have no more than 1.5 times its annual allocation in their line of credit. This is about $500,000, not quite $500,000. Based on our projections, we do not believe the city will meet that timeliness deadline this year. This could be for a variety of reasons: ongoing issues due to the pandemic, construction delays, supply chain issues, and being able to get supplies. It will require the city to submit a workout plan to HUD. We've already worked with staff to identify projects that are more shovel ready so that we can spend down that funding quickly and be in compliance for the test when it's conducted next year, if not sooner. As for 2023, the city is expecting to get $319,410. Again, we've done some outreach. We've conducted 2 public hearings, and the city solicited applications from service providers and other applicants. And we reviewed the applications with staff and are proposing to support the Valley Mission once again with their initial housing support program, providing funds again to VPAS for their Meals on Wheels and their transportation program. funding for Blue Ridge Legal Services, as well as Blue Ridge CASA. These are service projects that the city has routinely funded with their allocations. And then we've worked with the city's Public Works Department and the engineer to identify sidewalk improvements on West Beverly Street, as well as a potential water line replacement project in the Pierce Street area. And then also proposing funding for a re-roofing Stanton to continue their work providing critical home repair for low income, primarily elderly, but it's not limited to elderly. And then finally, up to 20% of the city's grant allocation can be used for administration. Questions for me?
Yes, ma'am. The amount of unspent funds, are they all 2022 funds, or are there any of them that date back to 2021?
They are not. Some of them actually date back to 2020. It became difficult, I think, especially during the pandemic, to undertake the infrastructure projects. Again, supply chain, it takes time to bid projects. I think one of the things, because the city doesn't receive a large allocation every year, it sometimes makes sense to cobble together a couple of years worth of funding to implement a project. And then if one delay in implementing that project happens, then you're stuck with that sort of that pot and for a while. And you're not required, HUD doesn't require you to spend all of your money every year. So you can roll it over from year to year. And that's what happened in this situation.
Can we raise our allocations? I mean, if we're giving the Salvation Army $10,000,
yeah, so
can they spend 40,000 if you were to do that? And therefore, at least the money is going to help the citizens of Staunton, Virginia?
they could. One thing, an important thing that I failed to mention is that the city cannot allocate more than 15% of its allocation each year for public service projects. So that's $65,000-ish each year that the city has to spend for public service projects. Rebecca and I were talking today, and I hear we work with communities across the country, and this is the #1 complaint. We wish that HUD would let us spend more money on public services, but because we could spend the money faster and still help a lot of people. I know some of the national organizations are advocating for this, but it's a statutory requirement, so it would take an act of Congress to raise that limit. It's not just a HUD requirement. It is a statutory provision that would need to be amended by Congress.
So
how much money are we talking about that we haven't spent that we should have spent already?
I think the balance is about $700,000 that's in the account now. So that's, roughly 2 years worth of funding that's in the account. I think the other thing to keep in mind as well is that HUD gave the Supplemental CARES Act money, right? And so communities, especially small communities that don't have a lot of staff capacity to push money out the door, redirected their efforts to respond to the pandemic and get that money out the door. And so, I think there's just a little bit of administrative money left in the city's CARES Act balance. And so, diverting your effort to spend those dollars has sort of taken effort away from spending the other dollars.
So do we have, or the projects this money is designated to, we just haven't been able to implement them?
That's correct.
Okay. So and that's why it hasn't been spent on other things, is because we're trying to do certain things like sidewalks or something.
That's correct. It's been obligated to activities. Yes.
We look like we're going to satisfy that soon.
I think so. Like I said, we have a couple of projects in the pipeline. I know I'm pretty sure the engineering department has indicated they're getting ready to bid out a sidewalk project. And then we have a project in Montgomery Hall Park for playground equipment that will help satisfy some of that as well.
That's the expansion of the playground in Montgomery Hall.
That's correct.
But still, we're getting ready to apply for 319,000 more. We have 700,000 that is not spent. So I'm looking at $1 million that has been laying around since 2020. And I know it's not Staunton taxpayer money. It's HUD money. I see a difference.
But there's no possibility that if we hold on this money too long, that they'll cut the money they're giving.
Well, yes,
to us.
there is. That's what she said.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not impossible, it's unlikely. HUD will do what they can to work with you, in my experience, to come up with a plan, help you identify other projects, troubleshoot, to redirect some of those funds to other projects. And so, that's one of my first sort of recommendations when a community has been consistently untimely is, are you awarding your funds to shovel-ready projects? What's the holdup? Should we redirect the funds that we've earmarked for a project that's maybe not as ready as we thought it was to a project that is shovel-ready?
So we have a list, so maybe we could bump something up.
That's right.
Still later on have the money to do the project we originally
Right.
hold it for.
Yep, exactly.
So when are we gonna
Leslie,
bump?
So-
Leslie, do you have anything in mind that we can spend some money?
I wrote it down to work on this and to have this conversation with staff, and you will
Well, I mean,
have any
to
other
me,
thing in mind
this,
right now.
to me, this is a classic example of sitting on money and doing nothing to help our city. And it doesn't do me any good to have $700,000 sitting around not going to benefit our city. So I would hope that staff would make this a number one priority. And let's get this money out on the streets.
Does HUD give a reason that they have this 15% guideline?
It's a statutory, when Congress created the program in 1974, they put that in the statute, and no Congress has ever considered changing it since.
Well, we know the federal government
There we
knows
go.
all.
Right.
That explains it all.
So I have one question about, the services that you said that you can't increase the amount that you give because that's standard. Does that include these 1, 2, 3, like Valley Mission, VPAS? So it's no increase that can go to them.
Correct.
We're giving them the max.
Yes. The city, I will say, regularly allocates the max that it can to public services.
Just to be.
Excuse me,
go- Amy, go
So
ahead.
because of the non-compliance issue, you said you have to do like a work plan or something like, when is that due?
HUD will send a letter usually within 15 to 30 days after the test is conducted. So probably expect to get it at the end of August, and then it'll be due 30 days from there. So we're looking at, September, October that we'll have to submit that to HUD. And again, we've already started talking with staff about what kind of things we can do to reallocate projects and sort of shift around priorities to make sure that we do get that money spent.
Ms. Glover, can we get an update when you get that?
Yeah.
Mr. Vaughn, can you update us when you get that work plan?
Can we either have this on the meeting agenda next month? It's gonna be 30 days away from now. Or the first meeting in September?
I understand that the plan was due, I'm sorry. They're talking.
Could probably bring something to you back in September or October. We need to get the letter.
I
We
think
need to
they-
receive the letter
Yeah,
first.
They're still waiting for the letter.
Yeah, and then once we
then
do
they'll
that,
respond.
So we have your plans, but at the
Yes.
first meeting of September,
yes,
your plans of how we're gonna spend this money.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
good.
First meeting in September.
Yes, sir.
again. Yes, again.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
I just want to say also, when we were trying to dole out the funds to the nonprofits, we could have given one entity more money and then kicked another one out completely. What we tried to do is go to them, ask them how much money would they like to have, knowing that we have a limited pot of money. And so we kind of doled it out a little bit at a time, a little bit here, here, here. They were all very appreciative of getting $5,000, $10,000. So it helped them achieve their mission. So we'd like to be able to give them more, and maybe at some point, the city can start matching the funds that HUD is giving us to help those nonprofits. That's another way of getting more money to the nonprofits. Looking at the projects that we thought we could accomplish in 19 and in 20, as a new HUD entitlement community, we had no idea the depth and requirements of something. And so Public Works provided us with some project we thought we could do, not knowing the timeline that the feds have. Knowing that now, we never could have done those projects. They were not, as Kate said, shovel ready. West Beverly Street sidewalk. We were ready to go with that. We thought, no, it's got to be designed, engineered, bid out. You got to follow all of HUD's requirements. Giving money to the nonprofits such as Habitat, there's money there and so-called free, but it requires a lot of hoops, a lot of steps that they have to meet in order to qualify to receive the funds. Now that we're fifth year now, we're like, experts of this. And so we're trying to shuffle projects around the one water line project, the Public Works, a little bit closer to bidding. That's one that we could probably roll in. And some of the others that we thought were ready, they're just not ready. And so we're trying to find a way, the Montgomery Hall Park, that was some money we could spend there. So we're trying our best to spend the money. If we'd known what we know now, we probably wouldn't have the same outcome. And as Kate said, the pandemic didn't help either. And so where we are today, I take full responsibility for that. But hopefully moving forward, we'll do a better job of spending that money.
Billy, the now projects you were talking about from, as far back as 2019, 2020, the money that's assigned to these projects, was there ever any point at which that can sunset and you can say, well, we need to reallocate that? Is that something that they're just locked into that specific project and it evaporates if we don't do that one?
Knowing what I know now, yes, we would have done that earlier. But again, we started 19 with what we thought were projects that were shovel ready. The pandemic hit. We refocused all of our efforts on spending the pandemic money. But those projects, which we thought were shovel ready, they were not.
Okay,
and so looking back, we would have moved those projects out, encourage Public Works to start moving some other projects into the pipeline that we could use funding for to accomplish those projects. But they also had to be within LMI areas. So it wasn't like we just spend them anywhere.
My understanding is like HUD money has been more flexible than a lot of people realize, like the work in Montgomery Hall Park, since that's a park that serves low to mid income.
Let me tell you that there's no such thing as flexible when it comes to dealing with HUD and all the requirements that you have to jump through. It's really tough. It really is. And it's a heck of a burden.
Wider expansive projects than we'd initially thought we could use the money for.
Yeah.
But okay, so it would be good to see if we can reallocate.
Yeah, we've been working on that for quite some time. Yeah. So, and also we don't apply to HUD for funding. They determine what the allocation is for the city. We don't say, hey, we need 319,000. They tell us what we'll receive.
Right.
Billy, was it just act of God things that made these projects not happen, or some part of our plan wasn't developed? Was something not done in Public Works, or was something not done in any of the things that we can control?
The things that we could have controlled that we didn't was adequate staffing to run the program. To be very honest, and it hadn't been for Kate and the consultant, we wouldn't be where we are today. But we just didn't have the staff in place to do a proper job of spending those funds.
We can't hire staff for those funds either.
Yes, we do. Part of the funding, 20% goes for part of
Correct.
Rebecca's salary and also for the consultant's fees.
Correct.
Yes. But again, 20% that HUD allows you to spend on administration was never meant to cover all of your expenses to run the program. It requires local governments to put in some matching funds. And so far, we have not done that. We'll do better.
Thank you.
We've got quality staff now. I'm out of the way, so we'll do a much better job, okay?
Good month. Thank you.
May I comment?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. I think one of the reasons that I was lucky enough to be hired, as you all know, I previously worked at the Central Shenandoah PDC. So I have more of a local regional perspective. We're lucky because Kate works with communities all across the country, but you all, the city is not in a unique position. In fact, I hate to use the word common, but it's kind of set up this way, how the program is, because you have to use such a big chunk for projects that are expensive, but we don't receive enough funding that they can be done in 1 year. So that's where it is. And so as we were mentioning before, if we could give more money to the community organizations that already know what they're doing and have everything set up, we would not be in the situation. But I just wanted to make sure that you all understand you all are not in a unique situation. And there are other communities on the side of the state, in the state, that have the same issue. And actually, it's just a very common thing. So the language is always very scary. And Mr. Vaughn is exactly right. There's nothing flexible with HUD. It's the most bureaucratic agency I have worked with in my career. And but we are working on it, and we're going to continue to work on it. So I just wanted to kind of add that addendum. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective. We appreciate that. All right, I'm ready to entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor. I move that the city council approve the resolution authorizing the adoption of the FY 2023 annual action plan and authorizing the city manager to execute the subrecipient agreements and associated documents with agencies recommended to receive HUD CDBG grant funds.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Warren.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and second.
I need to write Mr.
Mr. Kessler.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to item E, which is an update on Staunton Crossing site preparation efforts and other economic development activities. He's back.
I'll just put that there for
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mayor.
Madam Vice Mayor, and members of council.
Gotta check here.
Well, just one more thing on the last item. I want to thank also Cindy Fitzgerald.
Oh, yeah.
She keeps us on target as well, trying to track everything to make sure things are done properly with HUD. It's a real burden for her too, but without her on this side, we would be struggling. So.
Thank you.
So tonight, I hope that we can move that $750,000 from HUD over to Staunton Crossing, but
Let's go for it.
All in favor?
I never have a problem spending money. Let me tell you.
I never
Gotta
thought you
spend
would.
money to make money.
What do I need to do? Just close this out? Oh, you helped Kate, but you won't help me? Oh, there it is. Okay.
There.
I got it. Thank you, sir. Tonight, we, as in me and Amanda, want to share with you a little bit of information on economic development efforts in the city, as well as what's going on at Staunton Crossing. And some of the information I'm going to share with you tonight about new openings. It's not totally inclusive of everything that's going on in Staunton, but I know that I only had like an hour tonight, so I thought I had to cut it down just by a few slides. Boy.
And your last slide is?
You know, we're all aware of all the increases recently by the feds with interest rates and how it impacts all of us. But I would say that Staunton, like probably other localities, in spite of those increases, still tend to show improvements or increases in building activity. The blue bars there, we're looking at all building permits, residential, commercial, electrical, plumbing. And you'll see that basically about a 41% increase from June 22 to June 23. And for the month of June, only one other month outpaced that, and that's May of, or last month, the previous month. And so residential only and activity, you see 67% increase during that same time period. So
outstanding.
If we look at the investment side of it, and this is residential and commercial, and those values are values that when a contractor applies for application, he or she must put in what they believe is the estimated value of that project. And if you look here again, 23 is our tracking 22, looking at the first 6 months, January through June, 20% increase in housing, and then residential, I'd say housing, residential, then for commercial, it's about a 7% increase. That's really positive that we're still finding that people are investing in the city. Some of the projects I'm going to flip through quickly. You may know of them, you may not, but hopefully you don't know them. Wawa is coming.
No.
Right.
You probably didn't know that. It's at the old, the former Cono Lodge. We tried to get Buc-ee's, but we couldn't land them. But they're going to.
Next
gonna
to
tear that
Habitat.
down?
Next
What?
to Habitat.
What?
Where's the
Next to
Wawa's coming?
The Cono Lodge is next to Masaki's and.
Yeah, over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right next to
From
that.
Walmart.
Sand chapter, all right.
They're taking that site.
Okay.
Okay. That's their plans.
And you did try Buc-ee's.
Yeah, we lost Buc-ee's. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you did.
I did. You didn't think yeah, they're not coming here. The next one, Cookout is coming. Amy, Cookout is coming.
Yeah, right.
You've seen it.
Right.
You've been asking about that.
I'm ready for a milkshake.
Okay.
It's being built. I drove by and looked at it. Finally.
They are, yes, they're on the way. They specialize in burgers, barbecues, and shakes, but they're also selling chicken. So that adds to this chicken strip that we have out there. That's Firestone. It's right next to the Tidal Way, right across from McDonough Toyota.
Is that different? That Firestone, is it a new business, or is it one just located?
As far as I know, it's a new business. Braden Home Furnishings, they're opening up an outlet. This is in their existing warehouse on Richmond Avenue, right across from Valley Outside Landscaping and the car wash there. So they'll have a retail operation there where they're selling items that are, the style has ended or been returned, but they'll be selling that items in that warehouse. The size of that building is about a 30,000 square foot building, and they're currently working on the framing of the interior. A new brewery is coming to the former Coke building. Those are rumors.
The old Coke building.
Yeah, that's old Coke. Rumors are that a brewery is coming there. I can't confirm or deny that that's going to happen, but I've heard rumors that it's happening. Planet Fitness, the Kmart, former Kmart shopping center. I think the benefit of this is that it has caused the owners of that shopping center to do a facelift on the whole property. So that's good for the Greenville Avenue corridor. Micah's Coffee. They will have a drive-through. They'll have, in addition to coffee, a bakery as well. And this might be their central location for producing their coffee. Roddy can speak to that. He's a snob, coffee snob.
Are they roasting there? Is that what you're saying?
Rodney, are they roasting there as well?
Big enough to be where they're.
Well, they've been working on it long enough to.
I'd like someone to guess where this location is.
That's the old
Dices.
Dices.
I was gonna bet Mayor Claffey, if he could give it to me, I was gonna give him a $5 bill, but
It's in front.
they're adding on it's an 8,000 square foot addition onto the existing restaurant and nightclub.
Hey, that was the cleanest restaurant I've ever been in. They kept that place spotless.
Dices.
Dices. They had a good hamburger too.
I'm gonna move on. Just more activity on the Middlebrook Avenue area. Third phase of their mini
Yeah,
storage.
that's coming along too.
Mhm. Gave you a little update on this a couple months ago, but the steam plant, they recently received a $99,000 IRF grant to do architectural engineering design work. That project is moving forward. It'll be a restaurant and a brewery there as well. And then
Billy is
Did I see a roundabout there in Richmond Beach? You really, we're gonna do that?
that roundabout, it will start the public engagement March of 2024. And with all the easements that will have to be acquired, utility relocation, and then going through VDOT's normal bid process, guess when construction will start?
2028.
November 2025.
Billy with
You want to bet on that one?
No.
with the power station is how much parking is going to be there?
There's more than enough parking for that operation.
Down
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah.
I looked at it. It's bigger than you think.
I
See
looked
this
at
right
it too.
here?
I looked at it too at one time.
It's all the way down to here. If you see it. So you have from the building all the way down through here. Yes. Yes, sir.
Mentioned coffee, maybe we can talk to the coffee snob back there. His eyes got big on that.
No, he is a coffee snob.
Well, there on the corner, I've heard that that was a coffee shop going in there. What used to be the old
Wendy's.
No, right there on Churchill Avenue, Spring Hill Road. That used to be that little.
Oh, RPM. RPM.
Yeah. Somebody said that there was a coffee shop going in there. You don't know. Haven't heard that.
It's
Okay.
emptied out. It's completely
Yeah.
emptied out.
They need one there.
Okay. Just ask.
Good for outside of town.
Go back
so-
to that picture before that with the steam plant. That's an artist rendition for what?
That, see, that's the track, the siding that they hope to use for people to walk on, sit on. They might have tables sitting on. See right here? That's that siding. And they've been working with,
Is that not owned by the railroad?
portion of it is owned by the railroad, and he's been in negotiation with them for quite some time. He's even engaged with Robin Miller for some assistance to help with trying to get control of a portion of that.
This is Chip Clark, isn't it?
This is Chip Clark. I'm sorry, I thought you knew that.
Yeah.
So there'll be,
Is the railroad Buckingham or is it?
I think it's CSX, but Buckingham has rights to it as well for freight. And then I think the state owns some sort of right to the rail as well, so. And then you have Amtrak that's coming through.
Back when it first went on the market, CSX wouldn't even let you even put anything like park under it or anything.
It's gonna be a brew pub. Is the site where they're talking about putting that walkway, is that actually over the coal chute? So
Yes, part of it
that's
is.
like a siding, isn't
It's a
it?
siding. See, the coal chute is right in this area.
Yes.
Mhm.
So did Western State own that?
Yes. They did.
So therefore, CSX doesn't own it, so you might be
Oh.
able to negotiate.
No, there's issues with when Western State acquired it, there was issues with exact boundary.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not clear title to.
Okay.
In the essence of time, I'll flip through that. You've seen that before. We've talked about that project is moving along very well. Staunton. We'll have an additional hotel downtown. There'll be 8 units in that building,
Oliver Dome.
hotel style. Again, more apartments that are being built. Stanton Apartments, 8 buildings, 72 units. Middlebrook Trace Apartments, 2 3-story buildings, 41 units, and then 1 4-story building, 48 units. Then, of course, Valley Supportive Housing, they're putting in 6 apartments to benefit low moderate income individuals.
Is that in the floodplain?
In the flood, not only the floodplain, in the floodway. At one time, that was one of our buildings that we were going to use HUD funding for, and they had not done their due diligence, and HUD will not fund any projects in the floodway. And so that's one of the projects that we had to move the funding from one year to another project. Just Green Hills, our other big park. There's a 30-acre tract that's in green, yellow with the green label. There is an entity that's going to purchase that property and build a 100,000 square foot building for a new company.
What?
For what?
A new company moving to the area.
But you don't know.
So it's under.
I don't know who it
contract,
is. I really don't. They didn't tell us.
But it's under contract.
That'll leave us with 2 tracts of about 20 to 30 acres. So Best Buy is in that FedEx. This project, this park has been in the works since the early 90s. And still not completed, built out. Stanton Crossing Road project is moving along. It's scheduled to be completed in May 2024. According to the city engineer, it is on target, on track to be completed at that time. The park and ride, which you see noted there, just they're having to cut 22 feet of earth to bring the parking, this area down to the horizontal alignment of the road, which is amazing. They are working with the Bright bus system to make sure that a pad is being constructed for the shelter, which the Bright bus system will put in place, and that there's adequate pavement in place for those heavier buses. Our grant from FY22, we've completed all those tasks on the left, the reports, and our design work, which is the design of the water and sewer in Stanton Crossing. Here's the park and ride. As you recall, we did receive funding from the EDP to do the water, the wastewater, the sewer line on-site, off-site, and the pump station. We did not receive funding for the water component of this, which also would have included the storage tank. And so the design work is all done. Hopefully, it'll be published for invitation to bid will be published in September, October of this year. And the goal is still to have the sewer line and the pump station constructed and in place by May of next year.
Any word on when the governor is going to release the rest of that money?
And so the next part of that is we're still looking for $7.7 million, and we don't know yet. There's no word yet. We had a meeting with them last week before. We thought sure that they would be sharing some information with us, but they haven't yet. And so the marketing component, what we've been working on, Amanda has been taking the lead. She's been leading this part of it.
Welcome, Amanda.
Good evening. Happy to be here. I'm going to briefly go through the marketing and social media update. So when our marketing team met, we created a timeline of goals to promote city development, especially development at the Staunton Crossing property. Included on our team was Lee Downey with Hunt and Andrews Kurth. You may remember him from past meetings. He's been with Tim, working with us on this project from the beginning. He has prominent connections in the site location and development fields and was also a former economic developer in Richmond. His first priority suggestion was to create a department LinkedIn account. If you're not familiar with the LinkedIn platform, it's a valuable tool for the economic development world because it can help improve a region's economic climate by promoting economic development initiatives, attracting new businesses to a region, connecting businesses with the talent they need, and supporting entrepreneurship. So we launched our LinkedIn page back in March of this year and have seen a steady increase of followers. Please, if you are not following us, please do, and invite your friends to follow us. We've used this platform to share not only news about the sites available in the city, but to highlight various regional programs, relevant events, and feature spotlights on local businesses and people in Staunton. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. Our number of followers continues to grow, and our analytics show a strong representation of individuals in areas such as business development, program project management from all over the country already following us. So that's something really neat. We can look in and see where people are following us from and what their specialty or background is. So the idea was to build our audience on LinkedIn before releasing the new Staunton Crossing website you see here. It actually went live a month ago today, June 27th. It's Staunton Crossing. I'm trying to click on it to show you. It's not, oh well. It's okay. Anyway, so we have had a Staunton business website that features Staunton Crossing as an available site opportunity, but now having a specific website devoted entirely to this property, we're able to include more facts about, let's see here, get to the beginning. We got target industries, infrastructure. We even have photos, drone footage for virtual tours. We've got this request for information, so people can request more information and then we can directly reach out to them. Now, this is not a fancy tourism website, but we do touch on the quality of life benefits in Staunton, since that is something we are proud of, and it definitely appeals to companies when attracting workforce. But mainly the site is specific to lead generation, branding awareness, and focusing on an audience of investors and local site location consultants. And they are typically looking for sites where they can quickly gather facts that they can use to determine whether the site is worth pursuing further. You see, like, it tells you the electric capacity, natural gas providers, water sewer capacities, that sort of thing. Those are questions that we get all the time, and those are the first things that'll let you know if you make that first cut. So you got a lot of facts on there. I encourage you to go check it out, StauntonCrossing.com. And I'm very pleased to say that since we've had these platforms up and running, we have already begun to see heavy traffic and a lot more prospects coming forward. So stay tuned.
The last item I just wanted to share with you is, as Amanda has said, the interest in Staunton Crossing has increased drastically. We're at least monthly getting inquiries about Staunton Crossing. Next month, we'll have several highly confidential prospects and information being shared with the EDA. And then following that meeting, of course, we'll come back to council for a closed session as well on those prospects. But it's moved from just being a great idea to maybe having something at Staunton Crossing to now a reality. And it's Now up to the city to decide what they like to see out there. The tough part is saying no to something that pops up because it's really not what you want, but it's just so tempting to say, we have something. So we'll be presenting that to the EDA and then eventually to council as well in August. Any questions?
Thanks for the update.
Exciting.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you both. Thank you.
And that brings us to item F, which is a consideration of amendment to nuisance animal ordinance.
Mr.
Mr.
Blair's
Blair's
gonna follow
still
that
up.
up, but maybe he has a joke.
All right, John.
Welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor Claffey and council, and last and least on the agenda.
Last and least.
But before you tonight, we had discussed at your June 8th work session amending our nuisance animal ordinance and adding a new code section. And this came from a citizen inquiry about the current ordinance, and it used the term unreasonable and excessive. And there was no definition around that term. And so at our work session, we discussed amending the current city code so that instead of having what would be called perhaps a void or not void, but a vague ordinance, excessive, unreasonable, when I use those terms, you know, they can mean different things to different people. And as discussed, the Virginia Supreme Court had found a similar use of the phrase unreasonably to be vague and therefore void, meaning that the ordinance in Virginia Beach was struck down. Instead, before you tonight is a proposed amendment that makes it, and to address, I believe Councilor Woods had a question at the last council meeting. This would be applicable all 24 hours of the day. There's no time limit. But if an animal makes noise continuously for a period of 15 minutes or longer, then it could be declared a nuisance animal. And Officer Ayers is here with the Staunton Police Department, and as explained at the work session, citizens would have to initiate this process. They could call the police department. The police department would provide some guidance on this, but again, the resources aren't there for Staunton PD to send somebody out and listen for 15 minutes for each complaint. Additionally, since the last meeting, continuously has been better defined. And this was at the request of Councilor Darby, that if you say continuously bark for 15 minutes, it's not going to bark for 15 straight minutes without taking a breath. So therefore, as noted in your briefing, it does allow a silent period of no longer than 15 consecutive seconds, because again, an animal would take some sort of time to pause and not bark or meow for 15 straight minutes. And rather than me continuing to talk for 15 straight minutes,
Take time to breathe.
happy to
John.
take any questions you may have.
Questions from council? We got to tighten it
I
up.
just
We
remember the
understand.
first meeting I sat in on was about feral cats. And this ended up taking almost the whole meeting. And then we come to find out that the cats weren't feral. They belonged to the people next door. And the people that were complaining just were really good gardeners and kept their soil nice and easy to overturn. So that's why the cats were going there. And I mean, it's really, there's a lot of things that could make it hard to make this definite still, you know, because you could have somebody just wanted to complain about a certain animal or something and just,
Yeah.
so I just hope that that's not,
imagining all the interns assigned to sit there and listen to 15 minutes of barking.
Maybe if we
Continue.
could, right, I mean, there are dogs that bark incessantly. And if
Yeah.
Officer Ayers could just give us an example of someone who has complained before about an animal that makes noise incessantly.
Had a complaint on Anderson Street.
Oh, okay, we'll use
Um,
that one, please. And then we'll
But
be able to
they'll
understand.
complain either at night. The times currently as the code's written, complaints can come in 24 hours a day and it's not
Right.
defined specifically to the amount of time. We work with the neighbors to resolve the issues because they have to live together. So that's the ultimate goal, as with many of the issues that we deal with. So we have not charged anybody under the current code, and only 2 summonses have been obtained in the past 30 months for barking dogs. There is a concern. We do get a lot of complaints. We just have to mediate through it.
Okay.
Jane, is it an issue where people have complained just because neighbors don't get along?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It goes through us, and then they get a zoning complaint, and they just work through the whole system.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your patience.
Oh, absolutely.
I hope this helps you.
All right. I'm ready to entertain a
Let's
motion.
entertain. a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, unless I can change it again.
Did you just assume?
I wrote it out for him, Mr.
I move the city council adopt the amendments to Stanton Code Section 6.10.240 as presented.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Counselor Wood, second. Thank you. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And that brings us to matters from the city manager, Ms. Beauregard.
I have a few-
Welcome back
well,
from vacation.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be back. I do have a few things to say. It's been a month, like you mentioned, so we have a few bits of news to share. We have a ribbon cutting on Thursday, August 3rd at the new recycling center at 10 a.m., which is at 1911 Craigmont Road. And speaking of the YMCA, which we brought up earlier, their youth program did a service project and have been painting the shed out there. So if you've seen the shed, I know Akil was out there. I don't think they're done yet because the weather is quite warm now, but we'll be posting photos soon on social media. So hopefully that will be done or close to done by the time we have our ribbon cutting. The city, in partnership with Augusta County and the city of Waynesboro, has received a cooperative partnership grant in the amount of $100,000 from the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority. Now, the city has already received and council appropriated a significant amount of funds from the settlement, and a portion of that will be used to help match this grant. And the city of Waynesboro is the fiscal agent, by the way. The purpose of this grant is to determine how to maximize the use of settlement funds to best serve the region. And the grant will collect data, assess current programs and practices, determine gaps in services and the need to expand services, conduct community visioning, and establish a process to disseminate funds to evidence-based strategies that meet the needs of the area. The grant will we'll hire a consultant, or the grant will hire a consultant to conduct the visioning and establish grant protocols. So that's very exciting on that note. Finally, I added some remarks on the agenda, and I wanted to start bringing attention to the Staunton plan, to your strategic plan. So there's 3 areas I'd like to talk about tonight. And I think it's important to keep talking about your goals and priorities so that you continue to hear about them and the community knows that there's action being taken on your goals and priorities. The first one is under the goal area of infrastructure, and this is something we already talked about, but last month the city rolled out and featured at the June 22nd meeting the flood awareness system. And as a reminder, for those who don't know about this yet, the system offers real-time data collection and analysis, as well as a visualization of current stream conditions from a number of sensors placed around the city. Anyone can sign up to see the data on your phone or on your computer. We received a lot of positive press from WHSV and the news leader, so thank you for that. And 2 new sensors, well, 1 new sensor was added in Gypsy Hill Park and another one will be added on Middlebrook Road. Under the second goal of economic development, next month, staff will return to City Council to discuss further the creation of a housing commission. I'll have to say there's a lot going on right now in the area of affordable housing in our region. including a regional study led by the Planning District Commission and a SAW Housing Summit that will take place October 11th and 12th. And details about this summit can be found at sawhousing.com. So we look forward to speaking to council next month about the Housing Commission and the other affordable housing activities. And under the goal area of West End, a consultant has been chosen to do the West End Revitalization Plan Strategy, ERPPC, which is the same consultant that undertook the Uniontown Small Area Plan. And that work has begun and updates will be forthcoming. And those are my updates for this evening.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Mr. Blair is he leaving?
He's not leaving.
All right, that brings us to matters from the public. This time, we encourage people from the audience to come and state your opinion on what needs to go on in the city. A copy of the Staunton City Council Matters from the Public Rules are available in paper from Mr. Kesker. I ask you to come to the podium or begin your call, identify yourself, and complete your remarks within 5 minutes. Would anyone like to speak under matters from the public this evening? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Karen Russ. I live at 220 Biltmore Street in Staunton. I wanted to make a very brief comment. I've been concerned on June 15th of this year, Alexis Lovely, named age 39, died in the Middle River Jail. And I read in the paper that the Augusta County Sheriffs are investigating this incident. I don't know what happened. I have no information to offer, but I've heard nothing about it since. And I would just like to ask the council, since I know you're involved with overseeing the jail, that this doesn't just disappear. I would like a careful investigation done, because we should care that this woman died in the jail. And that's all I really wanted to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kesker, anyone?
No, sir, I have no one with their hands raised.
Would anyone else like to have matters from the public, would like to speak?
Can I say, maybe you want to say something? Something out of the ordinary.
Where's Mr. Blair?
I just was going to make a statement. I know how councils or any government body get along well with newspapers or whatever, but it came to our attention tonight that Keel Ganesh of the Staunton News Leader has accepted a job, I believe, in Houston, Texas, and will be leaving us.
It's hotter there.
And Akil, he has been a very, very fair reporter. And believe it or not, I've actually enjoyed talking to him and being around him. So best of luck to you, and we will be sorry to see you leave, sir, but congratulations. Good job.
He's turning bright red right now. Bright red.
Sorry, I didn't get that report.
He's like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here.
I would like to mention that it's 9:15, and of course, this is the price we pay when we take a month off or 5 weeks
No
off
kidding.
without having. But it was a good meeting, and I appreciate everybody's efforts. And I want to thank the staff for all they do to keep everything going. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Well done.